Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Begley. Mr. President.
Here. Please rise for the pledge, and I'll provide the opening remarks. I just remind folks real quick that today is Election Day. If you haven't gone out and done your civic duty, please do that today. It's important we hear from everyone and everyone weighs in. The polls are open until 8 o'clock tonight. If you need more information about where your polling place is, votedouglascounty.com. I can tell you at my polling place this morning, it was pretty much me and the governor standing in line to vote at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'm hopeful turnout gets a lot better than that this afternoon. So please remember to do that and weigh in on some very important local races and state races and some very important city bond issues too. Thank you.
An affidavit of publication is on file for the pre-council and city council meeting, and a current copy of the Open Meeting Act is posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon, welcome to Omaha City Council. We're pleased to have you here today. Look forward to hearing your remarks on our many agenda items. First, we will have a proclamation by Councilman Harney.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dave and Leslie, would you mind coming up, please? So go ahead and introduce yourselves if you would, and I'm going to read the proclamation.
Yeah, I'm Dave Anderson. This is my wife, Leslie.
Hi, thanks for being here. So Marion Anderson just recently passed away, and she was a great giver to the city and the state, and actually, as you'll see here in the proclamation I'm going to read, even on a national level too. But so I thought it was fitting that maybe we pay some homage to her and the family, and so I asked this proclamation to be put together. So it reads as follows. Whereas Marion Batty Anderson was born in Lincoln, Nebraska on August 13th, 1928, and graduated from the University of Nebraska with a degree in journalism, was a Phi Beta Kappa honoree and president of Kappa Kappa Gamma sorority, and met her husband, Harold W. Anderson, in 1950, and the couple had 2 children, David and Nancy. And whereas Marion worked for the Lincoln Journal-Star before dedicating herself to volunteer service in her community, being elected in 1984 to the National Board of Governors for the American Red Cross, and then vice chair overseeing the hiring of Elizabeth Dole as the organization's president in 1991, and was named the United Way the Midland Citizen of the Year in 1994, and honored as the Omaha Arthritis Foundation's Woman of the Year in 1995. And whereas Marion was elected the first woman to chair the University of Nebraska Foundation, helping to raise over $727 million as the co-chair of a volunteer campaign that ran from 1993 through 2000, a board member for local national groups including Doane College, Joslin Art Museum, Mid-American Arts Alliance, and the Public Broadcasting System. And whereas Marion received the Distinguished Nebraska Lander Award from the Nebraska Land Foundation, was named Outstanding Sustainer by the Junior League of Omaha, and along with her husband Harold, was co-chair of Nebraska Shakespeare and co-founder of the Alexis de Tocqueville Society of the United Way. And whereas Marion was most proud of her family and the difference she made in her community, she also made time for her interests, such as baseball, including attending games in every major league stadium, being a voracious reader who loved books and newspapers, and enjoying her pet Cocker Spaniels. Now therefore be it resolved that the City of Omaha officially designates May 10th, 2022 as Marion Anderson Day in Omaha, Nebraska. Before you, I'll open the mic if you'd like to share anything, but before you do, I want to, one thing that was mentioned a little bit or referenced here was her love for her pet Cocker Spaniels, and I would tell you, it's kind of a long story. I won't tell it, but I'll at least refer to the reason the city of Omaha's ordinance now allows for 3 dogs is because of Marion Anderson. So if you want the full story, I can give it to you later, but David and Leslie both know it, so the mic is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Councilman Harding and council members. This is a great honor, and we really appreciate it. Speaking for my family, my sister Nancy couldn't be here today. She had to head back to her home in Denver, but she was thrilled to hear about this too. And just to expand on Councilman Harding's remarks about changing the ordinance, this was back in the late 90s, I think, and she had 2 Cocker Spaniels, and she was getting a third, a puppy, and somebody told her, she found out that, well, you could only legally have 2 dogs within the city limits. And her response, typical of her, was, well, I'm going to change the law. And she did. And she had a secret, of course, I think she worked with you, Councilman Harding, when you were working for Hal Dobb at the time to draft things. But she came down and testified, and she had a secret ally in Mary Cornett, who it turns out had like 3 or 4 dogs of her own at the time, probably illegally, but hey. And Mary spoke passionately, and in addition to my mother, to change the ordinance, and they got it changed. So this is a fitting tribute to her, and we thank you very much. She was an influencer and a doer. She was all about other people and helping to solve problems and getting things done, and that's what she did. She got things done. So on behalf of the Anderson family, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I love that story too. She was a constituent of mine too, and a delightful person. That fits her perfectly as to her community involvement and her stick-to-itiveness on issues and things she cared about. So thanks for sharing her with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Clerk.
Items 6 and 7 can be considered together for Foxley Industrial Park Replat 5, located at 4910 F Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Items 6 and 7, resolutions to approve the preliminary plat and final plat.
Public hearing and vote on number 6 and 7 are today. Proponents, please.
Members of the council, Douglas Treeson, 10836 Old Mill Road, appearing on behalf of the applicant, here to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? I'm going to close public hearing and just note that I don't have the system working correctly in case there's any lights on. I don't know if you can reset what's happening here, or if a council member wants to let me know if their light is on at the moment. Yeah. So it's not enabled at the moment, so maybe we can work on that as the meeting continues. But for the moment, are there any council members that have their lights on? It doesn't look like it. Is there a motion? Roll call.
Harding. Yes. Johnson. Yes. Melton. Yes. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Yes. Bagley. Aye. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 6 and 7 are approved, 7-0. Items 8 and 9 can be considered together for Flynn Subdivision 1, located northeast of 66th and Grover Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. B is communications and opposition. Item 8, an ordinance to rezone this property from DR District and GI District to GI District. Item 9, a resolution to approve the final plat.
Public hearing and vote on items 8 and 9 are today. Proponents, please.
Kyle Timmer, 14012 Giles Road, representing Omni Engineering. As we've talked about in the past, we'd like to upgrade the existing asphalt plant at the Flynn site. To do that, we're going through this rezoning process to meet the existing standards. We want to update it with a state-of-the-art plant and replace a late 60s model facility. As we've talked in the past, I believe there's been ways that we've tried to address some of the concerns of the citizens and other people in the area with regards to traffic in that piece of it. So look forward to answering any other questions you may have.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? I know we have a couple by Zoom. Any opponents in the audience today? If not, we'll go to the Zoom opponents. Mr. Hancock, we'll get you off mute here in a second.
Hello?
Yeah. Name and address, please.
Hello?
Is this Mr. Hancock?
I don't think there's your microphone.
Are you an opponent, sir, to numbers 8 and 9?
Hello?
All right. Well, it's going to be difficult to have a conversation if he can't hear us. Okay, I see Mr. Hancock reconnecting here. Okay, Mr. Hancock.
Hello? Hello?
Now we got two. We have two off mute at the moment, I think that's the problem. Okay, I think we're, Mr. Hancock, can you hear us? How about Mr. I'll call him Mr. K. Is Paul, are you available? Well.
Hello, sir?
Okay. All right, Paul, can you hear us? Well,
Can you hear me now?
okay. How about your name and address as an opponent, right? Well, we can't understand your audio, so maybe we'll try and come back to you. We'll try Mr. Hancock one more time, and otherwise we're going to have to move on. Okay, Mr. Hancock, can you hear us?
Good afternoon.
All right. Name and address, please. Can you provide your name and address, Mr. Hancock? Okay. Well, I'm not going to close public hearing in case we can get these back. But I do not have a system of lights on right now. If anyone has a question from the council, I do know, and we did receive a letter from Mr. Hancock expressing his concerns, so I'm aware of those concerns and can ask about them. But I'll defer to a council member first if either council members have questions. Mr. Hardy.
I'll try to ask some of the questions I think Mr. Hancock had some questions about or some concerns about. I do remember this case at Planning Board a month or so ago, but I'll start with Mr. Fanslow and probably need Mr. Timmer as well to address the traffic issues and the circulation of the trucks. I think that was certainly a concern, as I remember, at Planning Board.
Kyle Timmer, 14012 Giles Road.
Kyle, there's a little button you can zoom out on that so we can, yeah, the other way. Thank you.
Okay, the existing traffic pattern, as we look at it for setting it up, this would be our ingress as we come into the site. Currently, that's being used both as ingress and egress for the site. As we move forward, the west part of the property, we own a 15-foot stretch there, would become our egress as we go out. Some of the reason for the change in what is happening there is with going to the updated standards, we are going to be required to eliminate this area along the edge because of the Corps of Engineers and the permitting process that comes along with that. So for traffic pattern and traffic flow, to be able to bring it in there, it would create a significant bottleneck along this area where that's only about 17 foot wide at the moment.
So currently, I mean, this is a currently being utilized.
Correct.
It's an ongoing operation. How many trucks a day are there currently?
There was probably in the range of 100 trucks a day as we look at it. And, you know, as we've talked in the past, we would look at that to increase as we move forward because there's going to be adjustments to our other plant sites and structures that are going to eliminate it and make this more our viable, and running a brand new plan is what we want to do because it's the most economical and environmental friendly.
Okay, so going off of that last statement, if you could talk a little bit about the difference between what's currently being done on site and the future use or the proposed future use, and how you're addressing some of the concerns from the neighbors as it relates both to sound and maybe odors as well.
Okay. Yep. The new plant will have an internal burner to it. It's a counterflow drum, where the existing plant has an external parallel flow drum burner, which makes it quite a bit louder. So the new plant will reduce the noise that happens at the site from the plant perspective. We also will look at upgrading to the noise, I call them squawk boxes instead of the beep, 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 for our backup alarms for the equipment that operate on the site, to help the white noise, I believe is what they're kind of called, from a backup alarm and safety perspective. As you look at the rest of the site, when it comes to odor, we'll be putting on a charcoal filter on our oil tanks. Most of the odors that come from an asphalt plant are on the AC tanks themselves and happen when we either bring oil in and pump into them because there's air relief that needs to come out of the tanks. The charcoal filters helps eliminate and reduce the odors. Those are things that we do not currently have.
But the capacity of the new site or the new plant will be how much greater than what's currently being produced there?
The capacity of that plant itself would be able to double what we are actually doing right now.
Mm-hmm. And so, but I think your explanation is that you think you've addressed the issues as it relates to both sound, even with the increase of capacity or output production, that sound and odor are being addressed to a level that it should be less than what it is today?
Yes, that's what we believe.
Okay. And I'm sorry that Mr. Hancock can't ask the questions. I'm trying to go off of his letter as much as possible, but thank you, Mr. Timmer. I guess, Mr. Stubbe, could you maybe address some of the traffic issues that Mr. Timmer brought up? I think was there a traffic study done, or was one required?
Bob Stubbe, Public Works. I'm looking at Todd Fixler in the back there, and he's indicating to me that...
Todd, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Todd Fitzer, Public Works. I am not aware of a traffic study that was done for this location.
But based upon Mr. Timmer's explanation of the traffic that exists today and what would exist in the future, especially I think with the circular route that's now being proposed rather than using one point of access and egress, should address some of those traffic concerns.
It should reduce the concern over the increase by allowing that circular drive. That's correct.
And I should have asked Mr. Timmer, maybe I'll ask you if he needs to jump up again, that's fine, but he mentioned something about the backup beepers and using some other sound signal. With the circular route, will there be less backups?
That should reduce that. Again, I'm not familiar with the operation at this location, but certainly if the trucks don't need to back up in reverse direction to exit back out, that should reduce that noise concern.
All right, thank you, Mr. Fitzer.
You're welcome.
I think that's it for now that I have. Thanks.
Thank you. Just so council members know, I think the light system is now working. We don't think the audio system is working, however, but do you want to try it one more time? All right, we'll try it one more time, Mr. Hancock. Otherwise, I do have a couple more follow-up questions along the lines that Councilman Harding was asking. Looks like that's not happening. Let's try Mr. Kasakavicius.
Okay, Zach.
Okay, Paul, can you hear us? All right. So I don't think this is going to work. So I'm going to close public hearing, but I do want to add a couple questions that I know were in addition to what Councilman Harding was fleshing out there for Mr. Hancock. So Mr. Timmer, I think these are for you. So I have seen the site as recently as today, and it is pretty tight there. I do think that what you're proposing to do has a likelihood of making it better and cleaning it up, and especially if you handle the noise and odor situations we were just talking about. But one question that I think still remains is the pure volume. You said it would double your traffic and double your volume, which I presume probably at least doubles, if not more, the traffic. I think 300 trucks is what's been anticipated. And that is really tight in there to get in and out. Can you tell us a little bit about your operational hours and how you see that playing out during the week and on weekends?
Kyle Timmer, 14012 Giles Road. As regard to our operational hours, right now during daytime hours, we typically start up around 6 o'clock. People are entering the site and work through probably 5 o'clock. It all depends on the business. As we move forward, since this will become a primary plant for us, we would have to facilitate and do the work as required by contract. So the NDOT, any interstate work is required at night. City of Omaha has major projects that are required to be done at night, and this would be the facility that we would look at doing those out of. So it would all just depend on what jobs we would have. Typically, we don't like to run at night, but when the contract requires it, we have to. So that should help address that. And when we're talking 300 trucks a day, that's probably a very worst case scenario from our standpoint. We don't have anywhere near that, even if we would move other volume into that, but we need the opportunity for us to grow just like Omaha is growing.
Okay. And so the anticipation or the expectation is that the business hours during the week are 6 a.m. to 5 p.m. with trucks. Yep. Only when you have specialized contracts could there be something different during night that requires the delivery of
correct
asphalt, I presume.
Correct.
Okay. How about on weekends?
Weekends we run Saturdays now. Sundays we typically don't unless it gets to the late fall where you have to meet the deadlines of the contracts, and that would be something that would come into play.
Okay. And Saturday is 6 to 5 too?
Yep.
All right. And then Mr. Fanslow, this might be for you. This is a rezone and a final plat. I don't think there's actually operational hours attached to these that we are approving. It's more of a verbal conversation we're having and an expectation that you reviewed within the planning department, right?
Yeah, Dave Fanslow, City Planning, that's correct. It's a simple plat and rezone, so there's no operating statement or anything that came along with that request.
Okay. So there's nothing to amend in that regard, but if you're committing to me today on the record that that's what we're going to see actually happen 6 a.m. to 5 p.m., but for the extraordinary contract, I'd like to hear that. That's your confirmation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we would like to run as our typical hours. If contracts require us to run at different times, then that's what it would be.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was kind of that's where I was going to go back to, but it is interesting. So the reason this is on our agenda is because there was some split zoning on the site, and so when the request came in, we needed to clean the zoning up so it wasn't GI and DR. It's just going to be all GI now. But that gave us, the city, the opportunity to have the conversation with Mr. Timmer and his organization to kind of ask for some of these other considerations, as well as what Council President Festerson just asked of you on the record, as well as what we had talked about earlier about some of the noise and odor, some of those actions that you're going to take to help reduce those, and so that gives us the city the opportunity to make those asks at this point because you had the split zoning and you needed to have one zoning cover the whole parcel. So that's the point I wanted to make as well too. And I'm glad we have some of those commitments on the record. I know it's probably not as much as some of the neighbors might have liked, but I think it's good progress, and we'll make sure that we kind of keep our eye on it. Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President,
Yes.
items 8 and 9 are approved, 6-1. Items 10 through 13 can be considered together for Grove Ridge, located southeast of 192nd and Harney Streets. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. Item 10, an ordinance to rezone this property from AG District to R6 District. Item 11, an ordinance to approve a major amendment to a PUD overlay district. Item 12, a resolution to approve the final plat. Item 13, a resolution to approve the subdivision agreement.
Public hearing and vote on items 10, 11, 12, and 13 are today. Proponents, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Brent Beller, 1140 West Center Road. On behalf of the applicant, with me today is both Jack Schrager and Riley Soderquist, part of the development applicant, along with Kyle Hossey with E&A Consultant Engineering. So before you today is request for our final plat and our PUD, just to give you a little bit of orientation. To the west here is 192nd. To the north is Dodge Street. This is just south of the Avenue 1 development, so a lot of development is going to take place here and along the 192nd corridor. But what's being proposed, so here is our final plat, just a 1 acre lot 4 of Grove Ridge, which is an existing subdivision out there. And then our PUD plan, which is proposing 248 market rate apartments, along with just in excess of 400 parking spaces. About 112 of those are covered and inside the buildings. So great addition to this area. We're pretty excited to get going on construction. This obviously comes before you both with Planning Department and Planning Board's recommendation for approval, in addition to Zoning Board of Appeals approval of a waiver of a setback, and that's that 15-foot setback off of Harney Street to our north. So with that, we're here for any questions, and we appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Hi, Brent, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you.
Good, just have one question. There was some discussion about ADA accessibility. Has that been addressed? Can you kind of explain that, what's going on with that?
Yes, so Brent Beller, 1140 West Center Road. One of the conditions was the addition of that ADA compliant parking. Before we could even be in front of you today, I'm sure Mr. Hossey could speak to it more, but our site plan and our PUR plan that I just showed you had to have that ADA compliant. So planning staff has already approved that, so that condition has been satisfied.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion? Second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President,
Yes.
items 10 through 13 are approved, 7-0. Item 14, an ordinance to rezone property located at 8909 Burt Street from R2 District to R5 District. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval. B is communication and opposition.
Public hearing and vote on number 14 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Fanselaw, I might just ask you one question on this item that's in my district. What we have here is a rezone of a property at 8909 Burt Street, which is arguably a single-family residential, but wants to be a duplex. It already is a duplex, I think, so this is a non-conforming use that we're making conforming. Is that correct?
Yeah, Dave Fansel, City Planning, that is correct.
And as we talked about this morning, I did receive one communication in opposition from a neighbor there. I think mostly along the lines, though, that the property has had some code infractions in the past and concerned about that. And so what they had hoped to do is make sure that gets enforced. And by function of us approving this today, this owner will have to show they're in compliance with city code and also then register with the rental registry. Is that correct?
That is correct. There's ongoing code issues with the house that I guess predated the current owner. So ownership changed hands. The current owner is working with staff and code enforcement to address those code comments. And from what I understand, they've already submitted their application for rental registration.
Okay, good. So from your perspective, this becomes conforming and then is also regulated under that code compliance ordinance?
Correct.
Thank you. No further lights. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Begley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 14 is approved, 7-0. Item 15, a resolution to approve a special use permit to allow small group living in the R435 district located at 3316 North 45th Street. Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing and vote on number 15 is today. Proponents, please.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm Shaquita Crawford. I currently reside at 5725 North 50th Street, and I'm representing Grace 365, resident at 3316 North 45th Street.
Great. And here to answer questions?
Yes, I'm here to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Any other proponents here today for number 15? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yeah, Shaquita, thanks for coming this afternoon. I did try to reach out to you over the weekend. I didn't get an answer or anything like that. But if you can kind of give me a flow or a vision or a walkthrough of your facility, I would greatly appreciate that.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely.
Can you just pull that microphone down a little bit?
Oh,
there you go. Yeah.
So Grace 365 is a private faith-based transitional home. We work towards women that's leaving a correctional facility to restore them back to independent living by providing resources and centers and tools that they can use to help prevent recidivism.
Okay, yeah, I had an opportunity to look through the attachment with most of the information there. How long have you been providing that service there at that facility?
We just started, so we don't have any residents in our home right now. I'm working with also Rise and a couple other community programs for when the women get out to help them restore back into the independent living.
So can you tell me a little bit about your work experience?
Yes, so I'm IT, and on the side I coach for the Ivy League. I work with little girls, and so the program that we currently do is basketball training for the youth. And when these little girls come in, they have low self-esteem. So it becomes more than just basketball. So when I convert that to the home for the women that's getting out of the correctional facilities, they're just broken little girls that suffer from broken consciousness. And so the program is basically to restore them, to rebuild them, and also govern through Christian values to help them back into independent living.
Thank you. I think this is a great opportunity for the young women that you're going to be providing this service to, and really appreciate that willingness to work toward achieving the goal here at this institute or facility. I'm going to go ahead and move that we approve this, and thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Motion and second. No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson.
Yes.
Melton. Palermo. Rowe.
Yes.
Begley.
Aye.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 15 is approved, 7-0. Item 16, to consider a Class C liquor license for 10 Forward located at 7224 Maple Street. A is communication from the Planning Department regarding permits for the outdoor area.
Public hearing and vote on number 16 is today. Proponents, please.
Yes, good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. Sean Kelly, 2804 South 87th Avenue. Appearing today on behalf of the applicant. Those recommendations from the planning department are acceptable to the applicant. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Sean, I might just ask you a question.
Sure.
This is in my district. I believe this is the former Benson Plant Rescue Building, right?
It is.
And so we'll be having a new bar or lounge?
Yep.
Or?
So it'll be bar, owner operated, probably not even a Sunday through Saturday opening, more event driven as opposed to a day-to-day operation.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks for being here.
Yep.
Is there a motion? Second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 16 is approved, 7-0. Item 17, to consider a Class C liquor license for Cops located at 2829 South 181st Street.
Public hearing and vote on number 17 is today. Proponents, please.
Hello, Chris Kopp, 21904 Martha Street. I'm here to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 17 is approved, 7-0. Item 18, to consider a Class I liquor license for Beach House Bar and Grill located at 5338 North 103rd Street.
Public hearing and vote on number 18 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Julie Engel, 4924 Parkview Drive in Omaha, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 18 is approved, 7-0.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Item 19, to consider a special designated liquor license application for Chevy's located at 2607 North Main Street for an outdoor beer garden on June 10th from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m. with music until midnight.
Public hearing and vote on number 19 is today. We have our proponent by Zoom, so we'll try this one more time. Mr. Edelman, we'll see if we can get you off mute here in a second. Okay, try that. Name and address for the record? Okay, I don't think that's working either. Any other proponents on number 19 today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Even though Mr. Edelman can't make any comments, this is an annual event, and I think it's it's well received and run properly. So I'll go ahead, even though he can't make any comments, and move for approval.
Second.
Thank you. I agree, and I would just say we apologize to our Zoomers that weren't able to chime in today. We'll look into the system and get this corrected for next week. But I agree that's the case on this one too. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 19 is approved, 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of the City Council may cause any item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed from the consent agenda shall be taken up by the City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed, unless otherwise provided by the City Council Rules of Order.
Council members have requested that item number 20 and 24 be removed from the consent agenda. So first we'll start with the public hearing on agenda items number 21 through 23, and that was held on May 3rd. Is there a motion? Second. No further lights. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 21 through 23 are approved, 7-0.
So now we'll move to item number 20 on the agenda. Go ahead.
An ordinance to accept the bid from the office cleaners for janitorial services for the traffic maintenance facility at a cost of $11,260 per year. A is communication and opposition.
Ms. Johnson, I believe you requested this one be removed?
I did. This question is for Mr. Curtis. I looked at the attachment and I didn't find any information regarding senior trips. And I kind of needed to know where are those senior trips being provided?
Steve Curtis, City Finance.
Senior program field trips. Oh, okay. Thank you. Number 20. On number 20, I'm sorry, Mr. Curtis, I'll save my questions for 24. So on number 20, I had some questions earlier in our pre-council, and that folks were going to get me the information, and that was from Public Works. One of my questions was how many times a month did the previous service provider provide a service to that building on a month-to-month basis?
Ned Tramp, I'm the city traffic maintenance engineer at the city's facility at 4303 South 50th Street. Yeah, so we basically get it cleaned Monday through Friday.
So there were five days a week,
yes,
Monday through Friday?
Without holidays.
Okay.
Yes.
So, thank you for that.
Yep.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
So, I guess my next question would be, the current bid is for a service that, oh, thank you, sir. The current bid that was accepted was for 12 days per month. So we're going to reduce the amount of cleaning from 20 days to 12. And is that sufficient?
Works, and Ned can add to this, but from what I understand, what we're currently getting under this new contract is exactly the same as what was provided with the previous contract. It is a level of service that is consistent with what is put out by the Omaha Douglas Purchasing Department. So it is essentially a standard level of service that's provided with regard to cleaning, and Ned can chime in here if I'm incorrect with some of
That
my
was what
statement.
was indicated to us from Douglas County Purchasing, that these are the standard cleaning. These are the standard cleaning contracts that are going out now, that are being bid on for our city facilities.
So in the event that we're at a facility such as this and there's an accident, a normal bodily function takes place in the bathroom, what happens then when that's on one of the days that there's no cleaning?
Well, we have 60 individuals at the facility there. We usually would pick up the slack or any cleaning that needs to be done ourselves.
So are they aware of that?
Basically, yes.
So, because I'm concerned about if something goes not done where in the past it has been done on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, we've had a contract before this current contract here where there were several nights we weren't getting cleaning done. I mean, it was just, they just weren't showing up. So we've had times in the past where that's happened.
So the remedy is to reduce the number of days versus?
I don't believe that's the intent there. It's just that that's what the bid was as far as what this contract. The purchasing mentioned that all of our city contracts were basically on the same format. And that's what we're trusting their judgment with.
My colleagues down here have a few questions that they'd like to ask as well, so I'm going to give them the floor, and then we can come back with my questions.
Okay.
No questions. I just wanted to note that from what you said, I pulled the contract up because it's part of our agenda, and the contract says under B, hours of work, cleaning services are to be performed during the period from 5 p.m. to 6 a.m. Monday through Friday of each week. So it sounds to me like you're getting the same services that you had Monday through Friday.
Yes.
Okay.
Well,
Thank you.
thank you. When I look at the bid says in the chart that these services are going to be provided 12 days a week and not 20.
Mm-hmm.
So they will not. No, it says 12 days a week. 12 days a month. That's what's in the document. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we're operating a business for 20 days on average a month. So that would leave 8 days that would not, the cleanup would not take place, correct?
Well, those can be adjusted. If something isn't getting done that's up to the current standards, this can be adjusted. Either
Okay.
through a contract change or something like, to that extent.
But it also states in the bid that for the first 3 years, that there would not be any change in the price that was offered in the bid.
That's correct.
So how could they possibly change? Would there be no charge
Well,
to that?
we would facilitate that change with the contractor if needed.
So a year from now, 2 years from now, we won't have your company coming up and saying that there needs to be a change in the price structure, because it says that you have to have, it locks you in at a 3-year period.
Yes, it does state in there that they do have the ability to adjust the prices per year.
For the first 3 years?
After the first three, the first 3-year period.
Okay,
And then
so
there was an option to extend it for a 2-year period after that. And then that's when the price increase could be.
Right, but during the first 3
facilitated.
years, you're pretty locked on that
Yes.
bid that you provided.
Yes,
So if anything were to happen, you would still be locked into that price, is that correct?
that is correct.
Okay. Just want that on record.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Mr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think there's some confusion on the contract and on the specs. I pulled it up as well, and I think what Councilmember Johnson is looking at is attachment number 1. And it's a breakdown on a unit of measure of the contract on a monthly basis. So there's 12 months that they're going to be providing services at $855 per month for an extended price of $10,260. I don't think their intent is to clean 12 times a month. I think the contract spec calls for cleaning 5 days a week, every week, with the exception of a few holidays. So I think there's just some confusion there, because there's also, there's 4 quarterly cleanings that have to be done, 2 semi-annual cleanings that have to be done, and then an annual cleaning, which entails some more detailed work, to come to the extended price of $11,260. So I think there's just some confusion on how the contract is being priced out.
Well, like I said previously, the Douglas County Purchasing, who facilitates our cleaning contracts, they said that was the standard format for our facility cleaning contracts, is whatever the quantities were shown in the bid form.
All set, Mr. Rowe? Okay, Ms. Melton, you're recognized.
Oh, thanks. Actually, I was just going to clarify the same thing that Mr. Rowe said. It's part of the contract that cleaning is required 5 days a week, so
Yes,
they're gonna have to get that done. And then there's additional cleanings as well for the price.
that is correct. Yeah,
Okay.
annual and semi-annual, quarterly.
Yes, and it's all broken down in that, I see in the contract, so, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. No further lights. Is there a motion? Roll call.
Harding. Johnson.
No.
Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 20 is approved, 6-1.
Item 24, please.
Item 24, an ordinance to authorize the purchasing agent to issue a purchase order to Chief School Bus Service to provide bus service transportation for summer recreation programs.
Mr. Bagley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Matt, I'm going to get your last name wrong, Matt. Parks? What they said. Matt, you got a second. A couple questions for you. Were the camps held, so 2 years ago, COVID canceled the camps, correct?
Matt Kalsovich,
I knew it.
City Parks and Rec. Yes, that is correct. 2 years ago, there were no camps held.
Okay, and last summer?
Last summer, we resumed function and didn't have full capacity, but offerings were very similar to pre-COVID.
Okay, and what's 2022 summer looking like coming up here for numbers-wise compared to the last 2 summers?
Yes, happy to share that our capacity, we've filled on what we have available at the 4 camp locations. We are still in need of a few counselors in spots. Our leadership is set, but we have a couple of places where people maybe who are still looking for work would have opportunity with camp counselor positions.
How many spots for the camp counselors are you down right now, is it today?
Across the 4 camps, it's between 8 and 10.
Okay, and those are leadership positions for kids coming out of high school, typically to take those, right?
Correct. We're looking mostly for camp counselor and above, our assistant manager and manager to be 18 and older. So yes, out of high school, early college, but definitely looking to talk to anybody who's interested and think they're a good fit for that type of position.
Okay, and I know you and we didn't talk about this in pre-council, but I caught you this afternoon. And I wanted to just thank you for your efforts on this, because I can tell you my kids attended Hummel Camp. This is years ago, but I remember how great of an experience it was for them and as well the other kids that attended that. And I'm glad to hear that things are getting back to its full steam ahead, as you said, for this summer. So again, thanks for your efforts there. And if there's any folks out there listening, I can share a little story. I was in Council President Fesserson's district right after I got on the council, and I was at Tiger Tom's having a cheeseburger, and there was 8 or 10 kids back there, and they had their camp shirts on. I went and chatted with them, and I had a good conversation with them, and they talked about if you have sent kids to those camps, those songs get stuck in your head. So I quizzed some of those camp counselors, and they just went to town on the beaver crawl and all these other things. So anyway, I hope if there's kids out there that want an opportunity for leadership, that they contact the city of Omaha, because there's still chances to get that. And it's great. It's a lifetime that those kids will take it with them. And I know as a parent, I enjoyed it. My dad and mom went, and great opportunity. So thanks, Matt.
Thank you. And I agree, these are hugely popular camps for all of our constituents and families, so glad to see them back up to capacity. And that we have now started to address the staffing concern around them with some job fairs and some other things. And I think we've also made progress on our lifeguard situation in that respect too, haven't we, Mr. Kalsovich?
Matt Kalsovich, City Parks and Rec. Yes, we are approaching the number that we were aiming for as far as providing what we said we believed we could as part of this season. We are in need of a few more, but on this day we can operate as we projected, but definitely open to people who are still looking for an opportunity. And that would be for them to check out parks.cityofomaha.org. We would have all our job openings listed there for them to access.
Excellent. And so the potential to have all of our pools fully opened if in fact we can work to get fully staffed, correct?
Yes, all 15 of our outdoor pools would be open for a portion of the summer. We're projecting that right now. Again, the more help we can have, the better, and the more opportunity we'll have for people to enjoy.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yeah, I'm going to follow up on my earlier question regarding the senior camps. I think this program, no doubt, it does provide a very beneficial opportunity for all the citizens of Omaha, Nebraska, although many of individuals are not aware, and especially our senior program are not aware of some of those trips. So if I could get a list of those so that I can share that with the community, I would greatly appreciate it.
Matt Kalsovich, City Parks and Rec. Yes, I can send that to you for distribution, and we do have information about that that we can have, part of which, and we'll make sure is available on our city website as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights. Is there a motion? Motion and a second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 24 is approved, 7-0.
Council members have requested that number 44 be removed from the consent agenda. So first, we'll start with the public hearings on the agenda items number 25 through 43. If you wish to address the city council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, and who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent.
Hi, Alex O'Hanlon, 3010 Lincoln Boulevard. I wanted to address items 38 and 39 and 40 as a proponent. These are to fund lead remediation. I just think these are really good programs, and I hope we can use these types of programs as an example of other types of programs to implement as we develop our climate action plan moving forward. I also wanted to comment on items 40 and 41. 41 and 42. These are home improvements for housing east of 72nd. I know I come up here a lot to talk about things I don't like, so I just wanted to take some time to talk about things that I do like. So I also like these agenda items. I really like these programs, and I would love to see more programs like this or the expansion of these programs as part of some of the strategies that we move forward with after our after our affordable housing action plan. So that was all. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Anyone else on items number 25 through 43?
Larry Store, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha 68132. I am a little bit of hearing, but I have trouble hearing you, Mr. Festerson, and I did want to ask, first of all, about the last item, if pulling something out brings it into a public hearing or not.
It does not.
Okay. I got to look at my notes here. I'm sorry, this is number 48.
So we're not to 48 yet. We're on
Okay.
items 25 through 43.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Any other testifiers on these items? Please come down.
Good afternoon. My name is Christopher Geary for Resolution 37. I've never been in a city council meeting before. I just wanted to come in and say hello, and if you had any questions, my address is 405 South 16th Street.
Definitely. Thanks for being here. And since we're proposing to have a street renamed or commemoratively naming of you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, I'm a martial arts grandmaster. I've been teaching here in Omaha for almost 30 years. I became the youngest martial art grandmaster to be promoted in the United States of America and second in the world. I also have a 6-degree black belt and 2 other styles. Kara Zempo Goshin Zetsu, which is a Hawaiian form of Kempo, and Tenchi Goju Kai, which is a Goju-ryu from Okinawa. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, and I volunteered a lot of my time to help disabled people defend themselves and disadvantaged children.
Thank you. And thanks for your service to our country.
Yeah.
I'll ask for any other proponents or opponents on these items. I don't see any, so I'm going to close public hearing and recognize Councilmember Bagley, who I think probably wants to speak to this street renaming. Go ahead.
Thanks. Thank you for being here and for your service to our country. And you touch on just a couple of the things that I was going to bring up. besides, I watch guys like you in movies do it fake, but you're for real.
Yeah.
But thanks for all the education and training you've done for people that don't have the means to do it themselves. You volunteered your time on that. And where did you grow up down there in Field Club?
Yes, Field Club. My parents live at 3526 Pine Street, and we moved from Des Moines, Iowa in the late 70s. So I spent most of my childhood there until I joined the Marine Corps in 90, and I went to Central High School.
Okay, well, and Council President Festerson's a fellow alumnus here, so got a shout out to the Eagles, I guess. I'll steal his thunder.
I'll vote yes for sure now.
Yeah, see, had him at that. But thanks for what you do and all the service for years you've done to the community. It's a great thing, helping people with self-defense and self-confidence, and I will gladly support this today. Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a motion for items 25 through 43? Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Begley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Items 25 through 43 are approved 7-0. Item 44, a resolution to approve the appointment of Nicole Wilson as an alternate position member of the City of Omaha Personnel Board to serve a term of 5 years, commencing May 10th, 2022, and expiring on May 2nd, 2027.
Public hearing on number 44 is today. Are there any proponents?
Deb Sander, Human Resources, here to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Any other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Begley, you're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. Deb, a couple questions for you, please. Good afternoon. Can you just give, for people out there listening today, there's 5 on the Personnel Board, correct?
Yes, 5 permanent members and up to 3 alternates. Yes, sir.
Okay. And just briefly describe what the Personnel Board does.
They do reviews of all things human resources or personnel. So if there's an employee that has an appeal, that would go before the Personnel Board. They review all ordinances that have to do with union contracts. They also review any policies that come before, the human resources policies that could come before the board as well. And they make recommendations on higher above the minimums, approvals for 2-step increases, things of that nature.
Okay, and they meet if I'm...
The last Thursday of the month at 9:30 in the morning.
Once a month, okay. And so let's say that John Doe is one of the 5 on the committee, and John Doe can't be there the last Thursday at 9 a.m. Tell me how that process works. If one of the 5 is not going to be there, what the process is.
Correct. If they notify us ahead of time, then we look to our alternates and we call our alternates and ask if they are available to attend the meeting in their place.
Okay, and does it happen the day before, or is it just hit and miss on when
It's very hit and miss. Unfortunately, due to COVID the last couple of years, there's been a lot of times when we've had last minute notifications, because if someone was just exposed to COVID or just learned of that, then they wouldn't be able to attend. And we may not have 24 hours to be able to call an alternate or contact an alternate.
Okay, and oftentimes before the Personnel Committee, is it fair to say that we're talking about somebody's livelihood that is being questioned or being discussed here?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay. So the point I'm making is, and I've never met Ms. Wilson, who's nominated here today, but is there times where there's not enough people showing up of the 5 that you can't get one of the 3 alternates or 2 or 3 of the 3 alternates to show up so you have a committee of 5?
Yes, we've had individuals, alternates show up when we've been notified and have contacted them. So we try to get 5. We have a quorum at 3. So we try to make sure that we always have a full board if at all possible.
Okay, and if, I believe there was one instance where there was only 3 that was on the committee that day that heard an issue that was before them, is that right?
Correct.
And it was a 2-to-1 vote, so what happens then?
When there's a 2-to-1 vote, then anything that is sent forward to the city council would need a supermajority because there's a non-recommendation that goes with the 2-to-1 vote. It needs 3 votes of the personnel board for a recommendation to the council, and then a simple majority of the council can approve whatever action.
Okay, thanks appreciate explaining all that to me. And the reason I'm asking that is because, again, I've never met Miss Wilson, but it was my hope that she would be here, and I understand she had a circumstance that prevented her from coming today. But I think it is important that, especially on this board, where you're hearing oftentimes the livelihoods of an individual that's an employee of the city, that I think it certainly warrants the commitment. If Ms. Wilson wants to be an alternate, that means obviously if one of the 5's not there, that she or one of the other 2 alternates will show up. And I just was hoping to get her commitment in person today to say, yes, city council members, it is my commitment to you that if there's someone that's absent, then I'm going to make every effort to show up, recognizing the importance of what this board does. So again, I appreciate you just walking me through, and people that are out there listening today. These appointments come before the council all the time, but it's important that people understand what they are. They're serious positions and a lot of serious matters. So thanks for answering my questions.
Yes, I did speak to Ms. Wilson, and she has a very flexible schedule. She works for the Salvation Army, and but you know that flexibility is for those Thursday mornings when our normal meetings would be. And she has attended, even though she knew her appointment isn't, you know, it hasn't been before you yet. She has come to a couple of different meetings just so that she can get the feel of the board and how it runs. So she's already attended in the audience at least the last 2 board meetings.
Thank you. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. I just wanted to share my concern about having a diverse group on this committee. We talked last week about that the city supported diversity. Mr. Troy Anderson said that you guys were, the city as a whole is supportive of making sure that there's equity and inclusion in all aspects of city government. And so at this time, I'd like to talk about some things why it's important to have this. We make assumptions, just everyday life assumptions, without any proof of why we do what we do, but we have certain biases. Me as an individual, I already make an assumption when I see someone come in the room, already see certain things that I just have in my head, just like everyone else. So these are reasons why we need different makeups on these boards. With our new millennials, and now we're having Mutual bring forth a large skyscraper to the Omaha area, echoing in on the need of diversity and retaining youth. And from where I sit, youth have no problem with identifying with people with different backgrounds, different ethnic groups. So to me, on this city personnel board, as well as others in the city of Omaha, I would believe that we would want to have a diversified committee. Currently, the makeup of our personnel board, and that's on the normal members, there are 3 white male, 1 white female, and 1 black or an African American person of color. And the alternates on this is 1 white female and 1 white male. And if we were to vote on Ms. Wilson today, that would be a second white female on this alternate personnel board. So when I look and I did some research on definitions of racial and ethnic categories, we look at American Indians, we look at Asians, We look at Black, African American, Hispanic, Native, Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islanders, and white. And I really don't see that this board is made up of those individuals, the different ethnic categories that we have. And this is quite some concern of mine when we as a city are saying that we are looking at a diversified group, inclusion, and making sure that we have equity on all fronts. And this committee, this personnel committee, would be weighing in on the weighing in on policies and procedures. And so this is a huge concern. So I would not be able to support this nomination, although Ms. Wilson, her credentials are great. That's not my concern. My concern is that I would like to see, and I believe Omaha as a whole would like to see, more in the description of the various categories that I mentioned. And that's the direction that I think we as a city should be looking at when we're filling all of these committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Deb, while I have you up there, I want to ask you a question about just the personnel board in general. How would these names, and explain to me the process of how the city goes about selecting candidates to fill a vacancy? How does the process work?
Anyone who is interested can go online and complete the forms that you have in front of you. And then once they complete those forms, if they meet the qualifications, if you're interested in being on or serving on the personnel board, you have to have some background in human resources or personnel in general to have that sort of understanding. That's part of the municipal code. And then those individuals are vetted through myself and Mr. Endenbosch, because he's the attorney for the personnel board. And if they meet those qualifications, then we make a recommendation to the mayor's office, and then the mayor's office also talks to those individuals, and then a resolution is brought before the council.
Okay, and that's for most of the boards that are selected, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so say for every 10 candidates that you have in front of you that you make the recommendation, how many of them are approved? Out of 10, the last 10 that you had?
I believe every recommendation that we've brought forward has been approved.
Okay. So, as my colleagues to my left said, and they both said it well, the problem with filling the gaps that we have as far as diversity on these boards, it's the beginning process. It's getting the word out on how do we get more people in the city across the board to apply for these jobs, because if they're not applying, and that's why I'm asking you the process, then they can't be selected. Especially if you're telling me 10 out of the last 10 that were brought forward were selected. And I know I've said this before, ultimately this is the mayor's responsibility to fill every one of these boards across the board, and there's lots of positions that need filled. And we hear that it's hard to fill them. It is, unless you don't have the right people looking in the right spots. And then it becomes easier to fill these spots, because this is just one part of it, making up a diverse board, even with the personnel board, but it's across the city, it's the same way. And then we have another issue, and this isn't your fault. I mean, you know, you explained to me the steps of selecting someone, but once they're selected, the other part of the equation is you have to get them to show up. And that's what I can't wrap my head around, because I've been asking this for so long. Is it so important to people to have this on their resume, or do they actually want to make a difference and make a change? Because the graph I have in front of me says they just want it on their resume. Because over the last 15 months, 9 months, we have not had 5 people on the personnel board. You got to have 5. That's how many should be there. Now, we can have a quorum with 3. So over the last 15 months, 9 of them months we were short. And out of them 9 months, it did take 3 alternates, or it took alternates 3 different times to equal that 5. And only 4 times out of the past 15 months has been an alternate been available. these are important decisions that come to us for final approval, as we've already heard. So it isn't like we've flipped a switch and all of a sudden we're questioning all the mayor's picks, but we can't dismiss the facts we have in front of us. 15 months, 9 times we've been short. So ask yourself, these selections that are being made, one, we need to do a better job of reaching out throughout the city. 2, is once they're selected, we want to see them in front of us to say, hey, do you know what this commitment is? Do you know how important this is to the employees of the city of Omaha, at least for the personnel board opening? And that's not your fault, but maybe as you move forward selecting these people, and I'm sure you asked that question, really, really hammer down, hey, do you understand that you have to be here? And I know there's circumstances that come up, and I think over the last 15 months, to be fair, it'd be really tough to have somebody there every single month, but 9 short out of the last 15, that's not acceptable in the city of Omaha. So we need to do a better job. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Melton, you're recognized.
Thank you. And I just want to note we haven't done 10 out of 10 because I think at least in the last year or so for mayoral appointments, I can think of one denial, and that was our former council member Ben Gray. He was the one that we denied as one of the mayoral picks. This council denied Mr. Gray, who is a diverse candidate who would have been excellent. So we don't necessarily approve all of the mayor's picks. So I look at Miss Wilson's resume. I guess I don't look at anybody's race. I look at people's qualifications, and I do think that Miss Wilson, considering there's only one female that's actually on the active board, her professional experience working for the Salvation Army, she has her PhD. She worked at Boys Town from 2013 to 2021, and then she started with the Salvation Army. She's been an assistant academic dean and instructor, counting supervisor. Her education includes crisis prevention, nonviolent crisis intervention certification, mental health, first aid certification. She has a Salvation Army caseworker certification, Boys Town Family Home program consultant, Peel the Onion hiring interview method. I'm not sure what that is, but it sounds very interesting. Signs of abuse training, human trafficking training. She has the understanding the lived experiences of frontline human services employees. She wrote this dissertation, and it was entitled A Phenomenal Study on Supervisory Support. So obviously that goes right into human services, HR experience is what we want for this personnel board. So we need to make sure that we have people on this board that have that kind of knowledge, either legal knowledge or experience in human resources. It looks like she was a trustee for Boys Town Village. She was a Human Services Advisory Board member for Metro Community College. She was also a foster parent and an educator for junior achievement. So I just think that I've never met Dr. Miller, or I'm sorry, Dr. Wilson, but I look at people's resumes, experiences, and what they can bring to the boards and just their willingness to commit. I understand showing up to every meeting is important. Obviously, those of us here at City Council, I think we've all missed at least one meeting. We may not have wanted to, but especially with COVID, I think sometimes you get quarantined over the last 2 years, so you can't necessarily make every meeting. But I also want to note that the current diversity of our personnel board, I think Mr. McPherson is an excellent candidate. He's done a great job, is a great pick for the personnel board. Megan Shoup is under the age of 30, and that's pretty rare that we have somebody that young on the personnel board, but she also had the qualifications and the experience to be on the board. So I really like some of the board that we have now, I think has been a very good board. I would like to note, we just got passed out I don't know where it came from, but we got some pamphlet, and there's a picture of of Mr. Pedersen, but I just want to note that's not him. And so I do think, though, that the people that we have on the board do have extensive credentials and qualifications. And the Personnel Board, in my opinion, is one of the most important boards we have in the city because of what they do. And so I care about having qualified members of our community be put on a board such as Personnel Board, our Planning Board, some of those where you really need qualifications and experience. And so I think we do have some good people on our current Personnel Board, and I appreciate your efforts in getting those people on there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hardy, you're recognized.
Just real quickly, I don't know if I'm violating any confidences, but is it okay to say why Dr. Wilson could not be here today?
She is in the process of being a foster mom.
Yeah. So, otherwise, she would have been here
Yes,
today.
she has a meeting with regard to that today.
Yeah. So, and I commend her for, I mean, I think that kind of illustrates part of the resume that Councilmember Melton just kind of read off as well too. But and I note that I think Council Vice President Palermo is correct, is that we do need to make sure that the people we're asking to serve on these boards and commissions are committed to them and stay in line with their attendance. Although I did note, Ms. Sander, that you specifically asked Dr. Wilson that and expressed that importance to her. So I know she's committed to it. I know she understands the importance of that attendance, as well as not only attending, but also being an active participant when needed from that alternate position too. So I think Councilmember Palermo is correct in that. But I will note too that, I mean, over the last a couple of years, maybe attendance on some boards and commissions has been lacking, but we need to make sure that those that we are approving are making that commitment, and I'm comfortable with the commitment she has made to you in that regard.
Thank you. Mr. Palermo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I wanted to be clear that I'm not questioning anybody's qualifications. A lot of these people we don't know. Matter of fact, a lot of these names we've never even heard before. But we do read the resumes they send in, and they appear to be qualified. Not to mention they come from the mayor. They're the mayor's picks. That's what our body of government is set up to be, is where she selects the openings for these boards. So I haven't questioned so much the qualifications of the people, because if that was the case, and if we had a rocket science department at the city and you're a rocket scientist, well, that's great, you're qualified. But if you tell me you can't show up to the meetings, then what does it matter? Last month, there was a board meeting. 4 people were there. No alternate. The month before, in March of 22, there were 4 people there with 1 alternate that made 5. In February, same thing. There was 4 with 1 alternate that made 5. In January of this year, there were 4 people that were there, and that was it. In December, there were 2 with an alternate that just barely made the quorum on a contract vote, which made 3. November, there was 3. And this is what I'm saying. It's not about qualifications, it's about showing up. You got to show up to make these decisions. I'm sure the people we select, because we don't know them, but we can read resumes, are qualified. So if you get picked, show up. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion and a second. The only thing I would add is that having been in a mayor's office, I know it can be very difficult to stay on track with all these appointments. If there's 50 or 60 boards and commissions, that's dozens upon dozens of appointments that all have different terms and sometimes different qualifications or things that require a background that is required to be appointed or considered in the first place. So it does take a lot of effort, but it's a very important effort in terms of our inclusion and in terms of our engagement with the community on all these different topics and boards and commissions. And Vice President Palermo and I met with Key Station recently, whose part of his job is to pursue diversity in the city and to impact those that we are appointing to boards and commissions. And we had this conversation with the mayor not but 2 hours ago that I think we can still do a better job of diversity in our boards and commissions. So I think that's a very important point that Councilmember Johnson is raising today. And attendance should be a given on these, no question about that, and something that we should be mindful of too, and are perfectly within our responsibilities to be asking about those things and requiring candidates to come and speak about these things when they do have these important appointments, with today being a notable exception given her circumstances. With that, there's a motion and a second to approve. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton. Palermo. Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Item 44 is approved 6-1. Item 45, an ordinance to acquire private property for the Copper Creek Interceptor Sewer Repair Project.
Public hearing on number 45 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, are there any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 46, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for litter removal on certain lots in the city of Omaha, Group 2022-0-04.
Public hearing on number 46 is today. Proponents. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 47, an ordinance levying a special tax assessment for cutting and clearing weeds, grass, and worthless vegetation on certain lots in the city of Omaha, Group 2022-05.
Public hearing on number 47 is today. Proponents, please.
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dewey Avenue. I just want to point out that on your agenda, and I'm supporting this, it calls for a special tax assessment. You're not simply calling it an assessment, you're calling it a tax assessment, and that makes sense to me. So I appreciate clarity on the agenda. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other proponents for number 47? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item 48, an ordinance to approve the redevelopment agreement for Mutual of Omaha located at 215 South 15th Street and additional property generally located between 13th and 14th Streets and Farnam and Harney Streets in an amount up to $68,614,696.
The public hearing on number 48 is today. We'll start with proponents, and we've asked representatives of the development and also the mayor's office to give a brief overview of what's being proposed here today, given its complexity.
I don't know how to work that, but
there you go.
All right, it's the point across. Okay, thank you, Mr. President and members of the City Council. My name is Jason Lanahaw. I'm with Lanahaw Real Estate Company, address 17070 Wright Plaza here in Omaha. Additionally, I believe Mr. Anderson with the Mayor's Office will speak as well with some additional details of the city's intended commitment. So first of all, I'm very pleased, I'm very excited to be down here before you to present to you what we think is a game changer for our city. A project that will usher in a new era of growth for downtown and a corporate citizen with a vision and a commitment to our hometown. What is before us is the new corporate headquarters for Mutual of Omaha at the western terminus of the newly renovated Gene Leahy Mall. With it will come 4,000 permanent jobs to downtown, 800,000 square foot of highly amenitized and post-pandemic designed office space, a 2,200 stall garage, 1,200 daily construction jobs, hundreds of millions of dollars of investment, and a skyline changing vision for our city's future. Additionally, this project unlocks the development opportunity for a similarly sized investment at Mutual of Omaha's current campus and surrounding properties. So we got two pieces to it. So beyond the skyline changing imagery and the noted economic impact, this investment is more than just that for the future of our city. To borrow a line from the chamber, we do not want to become Anytown USA. Cities never stand still. They're either growing or they're declining. And I think we can all think of examples of each of those throughout our country. So where I'm going with is a healthy downtown lifts our entire city, and those adjacent districts are either most benefited or conversely most harmed by the health of a downtown. So Downtowns are important. They're important to our city. And to further illustrate this concept, I am not aware of a single vibrant and growing American city that has a poor and declining downtown. They just don't exist. To bring that home, the fact is our downtown has lost 21,000 jobs since 1963. And so with the vision and commitment of Mutual of Omaha, we're ready to change that narrative and usher in a new era of prosperity for our downtown. Before us today, and I'm gonna try to be quicker because I know we have a lot to unpack. Before us today is the redevelopment agreement for this project. And there are 7 larger components I'd like to briefly touch on. The first piece is tax increment financing. So this same request has gone through the TIF committee, planning board, and then ultimately before this very council back in March. We have received unanimous support to date, and the request has not changed, except for one piece of it, and that is a piece that further illustrates the need for tax increment financing. The TIF application notes a project cost of $443 million. Due to a number of factors, including the current economic climate, the budget is now estimated to be $600 million, so even a larger investment. And this furthers the case of the very core of TIF, and that's the but-for. This project would not occur but for TIF. The second piece of the agreement is the purchase of what we call a tower garage, so the 2,200 stall garage within the tower. We will construct the tower, we will construct the garage, condominiumize it, and then the city would, with your approval, acquire the garage. Mutual of Omaha has agreed to rent 100% of the stalls, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Those stalls would then be open to for the public's use for rent in the off hours, and that is to support the Jean Leahy Mall and surrounding programming and events. So with Mutual's commitment to lease 100% of these stalls, we view this garage as an asset to the city. Additionally, it also alleviates more immediate pressure for the city to build another garage to support the newly renovated mall. The third piece of this is the purchase of 3 garages on Mutual of Omaha's current campus. So the approach here is that the parking will be needed along the streetcar line, and we'll fold that in here in a minute. And Mutual's campus is ideally located to accomplish this. There are a couple additional benefits here. These 3 garages are proposed to be purchased at about 1/3 of the cost of what it costs to build a new garage today, at about $15,000 a stall. So I think that's quite a big win. And also these garages will further support a significant redevelopment effort that will be before you hopefully next year of their current campus and the surrounding properties. The fourth item is a land swap transaction. So here what we are contemplating is the city would receive a parcel of land that my company currently owns at 14th and Dodge, which is the former Union Pacific headquarters. And Lanahaw, my company, would receive the cleared W. Dale Clark Library site. Upon that transaction, we would then transfer that property to Mutual of Omaha and start construction of their headquarters tower. So the simple comment of a land swap, I understand brings up questions, but I think there's some context to it that's very important. So through the powers afforded by the community development law, it is not uncommon for a project like this to request and receive a site transferred for $0 for the greater economic benefit. We are not asking for this. Instead, what the city will receive is an asset that we believe will be appraised around $6 million in exchange, and this will further advance the city's ability to control a full, important downtown block for future development. The fifth piece, and I know there's a lot here, so I apologize. The fifth piece is what we call the Park Frontage block, that block directly east of where we're proposing the new headquarters tower. That's between 13th and 14th and Farnam and Douglas. So same as the land swap transaction, options exist to ask for this at a below market value, and that is not what we're doing. Mutual of Omaha has agreed to purchase this at an appraised fair market value, which I think once again is showing their effort and their commitment to as a good community member. On this parcel, further expansion and other to be determined development would occur. In the interim, we will use this as the construction laydown yard and the trailers to build the headquarters tower. Upon completion, it will be immediately landscaped and feel like an extension of the park until the future development occurs on that parcel. The sixth piece is Turner Park. The maintenance of Turner Park, right now Mutual of Omaha subsidizes quite a bit of that, is City Park. Given their big investment in the area and their desire to ensure the success of the area moving forward, they're asking the city to commit to maintaining Turner Park moving forward at the current level of maintenance, operations, and programming. This commitment would not kick in until Mutual of Omaha occupies their new tower. And I think Mr. Anderson will talk a little bit about this at a later date with this future redevelopment of the area. We anticipate quite a bit of commitment from the projects we will develop back into this park as well. And then the seventh piece of it, which we just briefly touch on in this agreement, is the streetcar. But I want to bring it up because it is important from a number of standpoints. So the redevelopment agreement simply states the city will make good faith efforts to pursue the construction and operation of the streetcar. But what I wanted to make note of how important it is that this project does not occur without the streetcar, and there are a number of reasons why. There are very tangible, straightforward reasons, such as 4,000 employees that work in the tower and 2,200 parking stalls. There's also another very tangible piece of it, is that this unlocks the value and the velocity of the development of their current campus and surrounding properties. But also less tangible is Mutual of Omaha is committing to a modern headquarters tower for one reason, that is to bring people together and to attract talent. They believe a big piece of that talent attraction is having some modern transportation where they can attract the young talent that want to live on the line, that want to eat the restaurants, entertainment, go to work on that line. So we believe that's a very important piece of it. We also believe it's vital if we're going to compete to bring other companies to our city and to other talent to our city. So that is the streetcar piece of it. At a later date, you will hear the idea that the streetcar will spur further development and that it makes sense. And I submit to you two exhibits here. Exhibit A, figurative exhibits. Exhibit A, a $600 million downtown headquarters tower that will occur at the streetcar, and another, what we estimate, $400 million of redevelopment on Mutual's campus, all spurred by the streetcar. So in closing, I want to thank you for your time, your leadership for the city. I know I've taken up a lot of everyone's time here in the past few months, and I appreciate it. We obviously respectfully ask for your support at next week's vote, and I'll stay around, and obviously I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Kevin Anderson, Mayor's Office, Deputy Chief of Staff. Mr. Lanahaw did a good job kind of layering the elements of this redevelopment agreement or the dominoes that need to be put in place to make this project happen through a series of transactions, but also a series of commitments both by Mutual of Omaha, Lanahaw Real Estate, and the City of Omaha. So I'd like to give a little bit of a kind of the city's perspective on some of those deals. First and foremost being the proposal for a land swap. Mr. Lanahaw did a good job kind of summarizing what that entails from the community development law perspective, but ultimately what the public benefit is that the city does not operate real estate as a for-profit entity or in that nature. What this does is enable the most public benefit out of this level of transaction through a swap, and that the city will be able to further the development of another important downtown block according to the priorities that come out of stakeholder engagement, community engagement, that sort of process that will allow us to determine the best and highest use for that site, and that which furthers the continuation of downtown development and our focus on the urban core. So the public benefit becomes ultimately the control and facilitation of development of another square block of downtown real estate. Mr. Lanahaw mentioned the purchase by Mutual of Omaha of what's called in the redevelopment agreement the park frontage block, or that block east of the current library site. We know going into this process that these two blocks had to be very carefully coordinated in how they are ultimately developed. When the initial plans of the Riverfront Parks project came out, we knew that with such a large commitment for public space within our community, that ultimately these two blocks could become very prime and very opportunistic development sites. And that's consistent with the current downtown master plan for the city of Omaha as well. So that's been a long vetted process and commitment from city stakeholders and the public who participate in that process to, again, further our commitment and priority of the urban core and downtown especially. But what that purchase facilitates is the ability or mechanism by which the city and the Mutual of Omaha company can work collaboratively so that the two development sites are developed in a way that complement each other. We knew these had to be carefully coordinated from both an aesthetic standpoint or your perspective from the investment that was the Riverfront Parks and Jean Leahy Mall, but also from a functional perspective. We knew that both in terms of things like traffic, but especially parking, that these had to be carefully coordinated and done in collaboration with each other. So through conversation of the parties involved, it was determined that the purchase with covenants and restrictions on the ultimate development of that site is the best mechanism by which we can all come out ahead and further and facilitate the future development of the park frontage block in conjunction with what we're seeing out of the Mutual of Omaha Tower as well. Mr. Lanahaw mentioned the ultimate city purchase of not only the downtown Mutual of Omaha parking structure, but also the three existing structures in Midtown. And as he said, that helps us not only enable the Mutual of Omaha Tower, but also ultimately facilitate the redevelopment of that Midtown campus, including the existing Mutual of Omaha facilities. So that way the city can lean on those parking assets that we will operate within the parking enterprise funds in such a way to facilitate the development of that Midtown campus, upon the anticipated occupation of the tower in 2026. What he also mentioned that we truly believe in is the public asset that is the new downtown parking structure, because not only it helps facilitate this project, but also directly serves a lot of assets of the city in that downtown environment. Most notably, Jean Leahy Mall, but when you look at it at the 1 block radius where you're touching upon Orpheum Theater, the new Steelhouse Performing Arts Center, and the Holland Center, all within a 1 block walk from this structure, we see a very important asset to be able to facilitate night and weekend use that helps support the Parking Enterprise Fund and the lease purchase bonds that support the purchase of that condominium tower. And finally, facilitating the current level of service of Turner Park that, again, as a strong community partner, was ultimately developed by the Mutual of Omaha Corporation, and through a partnership with the City of Omaha, we've come to agreement on the high level of maintenance and operation of that park, and that's what the city is committing to. But as Mr. Lanahaw mentioned, the city is making a proportional contribution to that maintenance and operation currently. When we do pick up the ultimate level and current level of service of that park in 2026 upon their vacation of the campus, what we'll look to do is look to the surrounding property owners and the surrounding redevelopment as that funding mechanism for maintaining that level of service above that of which we're making our current contribution. So I've made the assurance to Mr. Kalsevich, our Parks Director, and I'll do so publicly as well, that financial burden isn't anticipated to fall through the Parks and Recreation public property budget, and that we will look towards the redevelopment as the mechanism, as a funding opportunity for that level of service for Turner Park into the future. So that being said, I wanted to kind of highlight some of the city's perspective of this redevelopment agreement, and I'll be around for questions as you have them.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now move to other proponents of number 48 today.
Dan Emanuel, 416 South 14th Street, here on behalf of the Omaha Downtown Improvement District Association to voice our support for the redevelopment agreement. Our executive director wrote a letter in support, which I suppose you all have. She couldn't be here today, so I wanted to appear to voice that support.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Please come down.
Larry Storr, 5015 Lafayette Avenue, Omaha, 68132. I'm against this. I'm not against Mutual of Omaha. But I'm against this because I don't think it's transparent enough. And I'd like to explain why without being cut off, called out of order, and escorted out. And in order to prove what I'm going to say, I want to refer to another item on another agenda item. But the way things seem to work at this body is today we have a public hearing. We don't necessarily hear all the facts. It's like the last item that we just talked to. I didn't get to that when you declared it. Items number 20 through 25, 45. But you did in fact make a public hearing out of it, but you didn't allow me after you made it. So on this.
That's not true. Stay on topic.
Okay, Pete, please.
Number 48.
On this.
Use your time wisely.
The way this tends to work is we get one crack at it today, 5 minutes at the most, if you don't shut me off. But I think the rules, and I don't have a copy of them in front of me because you didn't supply them, a presentation maybe was limited to, 10 minutes or 20 minutes total. Then citizens get to have a crack at it, but then they can come back and rebut us. The other trick that you have is next week you come back with an amendment to this, but we don't get a say because this is the hearing for us. Our input to this process is done today. Now, I want to prove this to you. Last week there was a talk about Ozone 2. The way the wording was, seeking approval to raise the property. Excuse me, ladies and gentlemen, I drove past there last week right after the meeting. It's been raised for quite a while, apparently. So the agreement was signed, sealed, and delivered before a vote before the public. And that's not the only TIF project that this seems to have happened to. So I'm wondering, next week with your amendment, you come back and you add in TIF to this. Mutual of Omaha doesn't need TIF. But you'll also probably declare some other areas right around it, maybe small businesses, as blighted or severely blighted. Somehow raise the rent on or property taxes on them so that they have to move out, and then you can put in more new buildings along with TIF. But I think there's a gentleman in Omaha that might be talking about you can't TIF certain areas twice. You might want to listen up to that because that'll probably come out. But that's why I'm telling you, you need more transparency because the way some of these things read, there's not enough info. And I want to close with this. That resolution number 44 didn't tell me anything about what you people disclosed after number 40, the list of things through 44, if you can catch it. Couldn't hear you very good, number one. But the information you people disclosed after that should have been allowed for the public to have a little input in that. But no, you insisted on closing it. The way that thing reads, if you'll excuse me, is that it was already decided, and it appears to be your decision, not that lady's. And it did appear to me that you were putting a lot of weight on her when it's your responsibility, not hers. She's an employee of the city, right?
Number 48, Larry.
Okay.
Are you done?
So please, let's have some more honesty. Oh, feel free to ask me questions because I know you can do that.
All right.
Thank you.
Any other opponents to number 48? Please come down.
Hi, my name is Decker Gabriel Woods. I live at currently 5017 Cass Street. I was really shocked to hear about the recent increase in the TIF funding for this project. I'm not sure if anybody could tell me what that is.
We'll ask that question, yeah.
Okay. What was it? What it was before? Because I know it wasn't 600 million. And I feel like, to second the gentleman that spoke before me, like Mutual of Omaha does not need TIF, and I know they said that they've committed to buying the block east of the library for at market value to demonstrate their commitment to being a good community member, and I just feel like because sorry, I've never spoken here before.
You're doing fine.
I feel like as a community member, what you guys have done, or Lenoha Real Estate, what you're doing is you keep coming and you keep asking for more, but I mean you're asking for more, but I feel like it's kind of already figured out behind the scenes, and so like as somebody who's trying to build things in this community, I'm an urban farmer. I like to grow food, and I want to be able to feed my community. These resources, this like city tax money, isn't available for me to do projects like that. I know there's many people in here and out of here that want to do good things for the city that don't get this free tax increment financing. I mean, I know TIF isn't available for every project that people want to do, but I just feel like as a powerful organization with a lot of money, a lot of influence in our city, I feel like they should put the money down to do these types of projects. I know, and so that's all I have to say. I don't approve of increasing the financing, and I also do not approve of putting a parking garage in this place where we've already been planning to have a renovated park. I feel like we need more green space. We need more places for people to go and be. I emailed my city council member, Pete Festerson, recently about how the experience around these tall skyscrapers and buildings, like it's very isolating. So if we want to improve the experience that we have downtown and make downtown more of a resource for people, I do believe that looking into some sort of development that is not a skyscraper, that allows people to move in and out of it, that aren't just people that work for a large corporation, would be very beneficial. Currently, the library does that. Lots of people of all different types move in and out of that space, and it's really, it's a beneficial space, and it serves many people, and I don't feel like the tower would serve anybody besides Mutual of Omaha. I know that they talk about bringing talent and things like that, but I don't know. I'm sure somebody else will comment on that. The last thing that I just want to say is this land swap thing, and the representative that spoke from the city mentioned that they would be considering some sort of public benefit at the spot on 14th and Dodge, which I feel like is kind of it's kind of just a waste of time, because we already have a spot just a few blocks south of that has a lot of public benefit. So I don't know why we're spending all this money to create something new. And I was also wondering, specifically, question for you, how would you consult the city, the members of the city, and the public to make that a beneficial spot? Because I feel like people have been coming to these meetings regarding this particular issue with concerns about that, and we just make the decision anyways, and it just happens regardless of what people suggest. And so my fear is that if we move forward with this and, as you say, move forward with try to make that 14th and Dodge space a benefit to the city, it's not going to be reflective of the actual needs of the members of the community. I did write about the streetcar, but I really don't care about the streetcar. So thank you for listening, and I hope that you all have a good one, and I hope that you can answer those questions that I asked.
Thank you. We'll ask those questions. Any other opponents today?
Terry White, 1951 South 11th Street. I just have a question. When the contract for the W. Dale Clark Library was let out, 22 firms sent in letters expressing interest, and on this, apparently, only one architectural firm was interested. So I wonder why that is. That's what the World Herald says, only one was interested.
Okay. That's all. Thank you. We'll ask that question too. Other opponents today? Maybe a show of hands too, just so we know how many more intend to speak in opposition. All right, I think I see 4. Go ahead.
Eric Oberg, 6319 North 36th Avenue. Let's not mince words and instead call a spade. This is a nakedly corrupt land grab. This is evidenced by the almost certainly deliberately backwards approach to the official process and timeline for recent developments with the library, something this very council has already pointed out, and an approach perfectly engineered to make the process as confusing and opaque as possible for the public, while also obfuscating clear pathways to propose different ideas or preventing bad ones. I think it's apparent to anyone paying attention that there have been very few coincidences. I do not believe it's an accident that shortly after Heritage Services began more actively leveraging its ties to the mayor to influence developments with the public library, Mutual of Omaha, a corporation itself having strong ties to Heritage, such as having Mutual's most recent CEO as a member of Heritage's board of directors, is having the downtown library's land practically given to them. In fact, I see no reason not to suspect that this was the plan from day one, as that's just about the only explanation that neatly accounts for all of the otherwise inexplicable and bizarre timing choices of announcements and developments over the past year or so. But regardless of how or when the fate of public property was actually decided, it was done so not only without any public involvement, but definitively against the public will in a nakedly corrupt deal. Honestly, every one of you should be appalled at the wealthy and powerful figures intent on circumventing the people of Omaha in any semblance of ethical process clearly did so believing they could rely on you to just roll over and obediently legitimize, launder, and rubber stamp it for them. Shamefully unethical land grabs aside, why does Mutual even need a colossal vanity project at the public's loss when they already have one of the largest buildings in the city with a massive amount of its workforce not even on the property and, commendably, getting to work from home instead, not to mention the company's history of kickbacks and unpopular trend of denying claims? Now, let's talk about what Omahans actually like, the library. The 2017 master plan for the library is often cited by the political and corporate players as a justification for much of what they've already done or planned. But if you actually read through it, it sounds nothing like what they've been forcing. For instance, one of the key focuses was consideration of square footage per capita. In that plan, it highlights the concerning deficit of square footage per capita in the overall library system and the fact that that deficit is growing. It projected the deficit to have reached over 121,000 square feet by 2020, which we've almost certainly surpassed. And do you want to guess how many square feet are lost by demolishing the W. Dale Clark Library? Over 122,000. Granted, the new location downtown has about 42,000 square feet, but let's remember that the new library doesn't even get a full 3/4 of that, which incidentally, if my math is correct, would put the downtown library below the 0.75 square feet per capita goal the master plan specifically says libraries need. And even combined with the derelict Shopco, the combined space is still a net loss. As a similar issue, a patron demographic that has arguably had the least amount of say or consideration, but a demographic that's simultaneously probably the single most consistent one specific to the downtown library, is that of the poor and homeless. Even if we assume the leased downtown location will have adequate space for conventional service population, we're lying to ourselves if we think the downtown library has the exact same patrons as other branches. Anyone downplaying that by saying we just want to treat everyone the same, we don't care where people come from, is just conveniently using an excuse to ignore the unique needs of and obstacles against our homeless population. Notably, we're living through a pandemic era with sky-high case counts today in Nebraska, not just 2 years ago, and the need to safely spatially distance without being exposed to the elements is a nearly impossible gargantuan struggle for those who have no shelter during the day without a large library. But the leases are basically a done deal, I hear you say, and the Central Library project with new admin spaces really does reduce the size needed downtown, and the move is already in motion, even if you wanted to respect the will of the people. All right, let's grant that. Why should the reduction in spatial needs justify going along with a corporate land grab and reducing the library's capacity to adequately serve the most vulnerable? Why can't the leases instead be used for good? If the excuse is that there just aren't much of any viable locations downtown for a library, then it leaves me thinking, if only there was a big piece of land, say the size of a whole block, where the current building is or will be torn down, and that the city already owned to do with as the public wants. Why not take advantage of having everything cleared out of W. Dale Clark and use that time, funding, and resources that would have gone to an unaccountable corporation to instead build a perfect 21st century library specifically tailored to the needs of a modern downtown population? As already declared by those in favor of the land grab, a downtown library doesn't even need to be as big as W. Dale Clark is, and right now, only about 3/5 of it are actually accessible to the public, yet just that amount does a phenomenal job of balancing spatial distance with adequate amenities for patrons, which would actually reduce the financial and resource cost for building a new library without having to worry about admin spaces. Help put a stop to the attitude prevalent in elite circles of this city that simply having concentrated vast power and wealth to themselves means that public services and the public itself is theirs to dictate and control, and vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Other opponents?
Luis Jimenez, 2709 Dewey Avenue. I'm sorry, Mr. President. I have allergies. I took some Benadryl, but I'm going to try to focus. I want to relay a personal story about downtown. When I first moved into Omaha, one of the first things I read about Omaha history was downtown during the 1960s and 70s, how local artists, moved in and brought excitement to the area. And since then, it seems to me that there's been demolition, corporate headquarters, corporate interests that have taken the narrative or the initiative to redevelop downtown. I concur with the fact that this is a large project, and by it being so large, you can scale it back. You know what I'm saying? There's nothing that is saying that this project has to be this large, that has to be this big. So the arguments that that this project is getting a lot of assistance from the city, I think are true. And so I would challenge the developers that if this goes through, which is going to go through, if you guys were going to be involved in this redevelopment, you'd probably have it in your committee, in one of your committees, or ongoing discussions with the mayor's office, with the executive. So this is going to go through. So I challenge the developers to commit commission work, or to buy commission work from local artists. You got a lot of floors that are going to be there. Would they be comfortable paying local artists for the artwork that's going to be inside this massive building? Thank you.
Thank you. Other opponents?
Good afternoon. Kimara Snipes, 1729 South 12th Street, East Omaha organizer. I do not have an issue with Mutual of Omaha. My issues are more so with the culture of the city, really. I love the library, and I really do love the library. When I worked at the Washington branch, I'm also a former library specialist from the main branch as well. When I worked at the Washington branch, I was there every day, including on my days off. I love people, but that's because I also believe in communication, and that's not something that the city does so well. You want to know why people are so angry and frustrated with this process? People don't like surprises unless they're wrapped in a box with a bow on it, and you should write that down. This whole process lacked real, proper, intentional, empathetic communication. I say that not just as a lover of the library or as a citizen of the city, but as someone who leads people. I preside over, but do not stand here today in representation of an organization that organizes people and prides itself on communication and collaboration, on providing information, on providing space for people to hear from their elected officials, on providing space to let your elected officials know how you feel. You'll say, oh, we had community meetings. We put it in the newspaper. We invited the public. This is a real world, and that's not real, proper, intentional, and empathetic communication. I had a meeting with someone from the city in the last 6 months, and I won't say which department because unfortunately, there's also a culture of fear in this city from simply just speaking your mind. They said to me, Kimra, do you know how hard it is to get inside doors in this place that you need to be in when all you want to do is just be able to tell people what's going on? That's ridiculous. How can people thrive in a culture like that? And by people, I mean the people who live in this city. The city has let it be known they're going to do what they want, when they want, and how they want. Today it's the library. Tomorrow, though, it's going to be something else. But people are waking up and they are rising up. If you have not paid attention the last couple of years, they're also showing up at the polls through intentional organizing. You have to learn to listen. You have to learn to communicate. I'm happy to invite you to one of our organizing meetings where you can sit, observe, and learn from the best of them every first Thursday of the month. The city wants to make a good faith effort to build a streetcar. Maybe if you put as much effort as you did into these agreements I heard today with Mutual, as you did into the communication with us, we might not even be here today. How about making a good faith effort to listen to your constituents and learn how to communicate with us too?
Thank you. Other opponents, please.
Aho, Omaha Amble, Ijaja Wite Aweton. My French Christian name is John Papan. I live at 125 North 33rd, 68131. I guess I wanted to first say that as a member of the people who originally lived here, way before that 54 treaty was signed, there's always been concern about this area. Our people have always loved this area. We were sad to see Hoboken Park go away, AKA Jefferson Square, because that was truly a community park, a place, a public space for everyone. There was such a diversity that went to that. And I see this public library going the same way that that park did. I think that we need to remember that as the city council, you serve the citizens of Omaha, and not just at election time, always. I just wanted to make a comment that this company had got use of this Omaha Chief mascot for many, many years without a single contribution toward the Native community. And I'll just let that go for now. But I think that we need to seriously think with all these other concerns that were brought up. And I hope that you would do the right thing for the city and the citizens. We need more public spaces, not only parks, but we need a decent library. It's really sad that it's kind of really gone downhill. So thank you.
Thank you. Next opponent, please. I think we have two more.
Alex O'Hanlon, 3010 Lincoln Boulevard. I think that a lot of the testimony that we heard earlier was really good, and I think I'm just kind of going to iterate some points. But also, one thing I wanted to bring up that I don't think anyone quite touched on yet is just that there's a lot of money that the city is going to be spending on parking with this redevelopment plan. And while I appreciate the city trying to make these places accessible, from the point of view of like the success of the streetcar, having large amounts of parking available along the streetcar, I feel like will mitigate the success of the streetcar as a successful form of transportation. And I know that this is supposed to be kind of like the first piece of a larger transportation system. So it's really important that it's really successful. And so I think that forcing people to use it by building it and then not necessarily subsidizing huge amounts of parking along that line is what will get more people to use the streetcar. Additionally, those funds that are spent on parking could be spent on other types of amenities for the public. So I really feel like that's really important, and I feel like we maybe shouldn't move forward with this project until that's worked out. And then additionally, I just wanted to talk about something that a lot of folks had mentioned, which is, we've heard a lot from Mutual and from the city and from Lanahaw that the purpose of this development, or one of the main purposes, one other thing I want to mention about the parking was that they did mention that there's going to be 4,000 people working there, but only 2,200 units. But I've also heard mentioned in other meetings that there won't be times when all 4,000 workers are there. So I don't think that that should be taken as a reason that we are going to need both the streetcar and the parking. With the streetcar, with the fact that Mutual is not going to be going back to 100% in person in the office, and there's going to be 2,200 parking units, and there's going to be a streetcar, we shouldn't need additional parking. So just wanted to point that out. That was a little stat I had in my mind. Okay, so then to jump to my next point. Earlier when I took that stuff off the consent agenda, I talked a lot about just wanting to be positive and work together. And so I also liked what Mr. Anderson from the mayor's office was saying about the purpose of the city doing these land swaps and the city being involved in development is because then the city can have control over how development happens. And I think that's a really good point, as long as we actually have control over the type of development that happens. So I would like to see, in this process, I'd really like to just see it start all over again because it's been so rushed. And I think we know how rushed it was because a lot of you felt like it was really rushed when we first heard about this a couple months ago with that first vote. So just gonna iterate, if it wasn't a good idea then, it's not a good idea now. But this process has been really rushed. I'd love to see it taken back a step. But what I'd also like to see moving forward in everything is the folks that hold the most power in this city. So the mayor, people's in the mayor's office, elected officials, developers, and also corporations. I'd like to see them start the conversation and change that conversation to a collaboration. So when we move forward, if we're gonna move forward with this staging ground that the city, that Mutual is going to buy the staging ground from the city, and then they said that they would landscape it. And then I saw in the redevelopment plan that the city could one day buy that land back if they so choose. That could be a great place for a new central library. And having that conversation, starting that conversation now could be a way that maybe people start to feel more considered in this process. But either way, going forward, I always appreciate having this space to be heard and getting to meet with people on other occasions to talk about these things, but I would really just like to see that process become standardized, become authentic, and be initiated before the plans are made, not just afterwards to say that it happened. And we also talked about, or folks have talked about how this is to combat brain drain. But there's a lot of brains in this room that are feeling pretty drained right now. Next. just came up with that. And so I think that one of the best ways to attract people here and keep people here is to create an authentic culture in Omaha. So not just to run at, well, you know, they did this in Denver, so we should do this here, or they did this in Atlanta, so we should do this here. But rather, how can everybody in this room and others who have felt disengaged from this process already, how can we create authentic developments that people aren't going to be like, oh yeah, I think that was in Omaha. They're going to be like, yeah, in Omaha, you know what they have? They have like these really cool developments that, yes, local artists are part of. Like, yes, local farmers are part of. Yes, local musicians, local politicians, like all these people coming together to make something that doesn't exist anywhere else. And that's because they've worked together from the beginning and they've created something that can't be made anywhere else. This isn't that, and I hope that we can move forward and create something that is.
Thank you. Other opponents, please. Two more? Come on down.
Hello. My name is Ben Frazier, 12724 Sky Park Drive. The library has meant a lot to me because it was there for me when I had nothing. I was homeless between 2018 to 2019, and I learned a lot of culture. I met a lot of people, and I'd like to share that with a lot of other people, and not directly, because I want that to still be experienced for other people to come. I learned how to code. I landed a job because of that library. There is so much culture and so much passion, even in just that little 4-story building. I understand that Mutual of Omaha needs to expand, and they do a lot of good for the community in regards to jobs. But the library also helped me, even if I'm just one person versus 4,000 jobs. So if you'll hear us out, I'd like to continue that passion. So, thank you.
Thank you. Other opponents, please.
Hello, good afternoon. Hi, my name is DeJuan Lamont Hayes. I live at 1707 Park Avenue in Omaha, Nebraska. Interesting, my former council member's not here.
Excuse me. He's not on the agenda as a presenter. Okay,
Sit down, Larry. You can show a visual.
5 minutes.
This is our library currently. And if you look at it, right now there's a bus right in front. All of our city's buses stop right there currently. They terminus right in front of the library. Some 15 of our bus lines intersect at this point and have to sit on the side of construction on the sidewalk so people can actually board. We have the opportunity to do something truly incredible here. Towers don't bring people. Towers don't make cities. People do. I heard a lot about how this specific project is going to attract and retain talent, and how it's going to be a beacon for the city in development. I want to tell you a story about my experience this last weekend. Friday was Benson First Friday. If you've never heard of it, you should look it up. It happens every Friday of the month. And the streets were closed down and artists filled them, and so did families of every age, shade, and color, and we danced in joy, and we celebrated in the street, creating our lives, celebrating our beings at this moment. That is Omaha to me. That is the culture that is created. Saturday at Fabric Lab on North 24th Street. Again, look it up. Pull Up and Vibe, an open mic that's free and open to the public to gather, all ages, to share their story, to be heard, and to heal together. Sunday, I attended an event called Her Embrace, hosted at Holy Family Community Center. It was a Mother's Day celebration, hosted by a dear artist friend of mine, Elijah Makiza. Free, open to the public to come and share their art and be heard and heal. And every time I stepped into one of those spaces, I said, this is Omaha. This is what Omaha truly is. We're people who care and who listen to one another. And it's clear that we are not listened to here. And it's been said many, many times. I literally put on a suit, so maybe you might look at me and might just consider that what I'm saying is valid. Because, frankly, this is bullshit.
Let's be respectful with the language, please.
Yes, but I had to say it because it's true. And we've all been thinking it, but no one said it out loud because we're afraid of being removed. We're afraid of expressing ourselves truly as we are. We're afraid of expressing our anger truly as it is because it will be ignored. And then we're expected to go home and figure it out. I've talked to hundreds of people since the announcement in January, and I mean hundreds, literally. Most of them not even knowing that this project is happening. Why is that? Because the communications department was abolished in 2013 during the last charter convention. And abolished, she might say, absorbed into the mayor's office so that the narrative can be controlled and limited. We do not have a connection to our mayor, whose crown jewel she wants this to be. Let's call it what it is. We don't like poor people, we want to celebrate corporatism, and we want to say, look, Omaha is powerful, look how big our penis in the sky is, because that's what it looks like. We have the opportunity to save and preserve our building. Adaptive reuse. You know what a real investment is? Utilizing what you already have and improving upon it for the greater good of all that is present. That's a real investment. You have a building made of Bedford limestone and poured concrete that stands at 125,000 square feet in the center of our city that holds the lineage and history of how we came to be. And then you want to separate it and throw it in a shopco that people can't even access? Listen to what's being said here. We're saying people don't matter. This space is ugly. We don't care. We're going to put money in corporatism first because Mutual of Omaha is Omaha. The people here are just happenstance. We're their customers who subsidize them. We have the opportunity to make something truly beautiful. A central station that can be a hub for all of us. Utilizing the building that already stands, improving upon the square footage, utilizing the metro lines that have been established there that circulate the center of our city, turn the first block into a terminal where the buses can convene, and then the building is repurposed to be a cultural center and a welcoming place for anyone who comes to Omaha. If you get off at Epley Airfield and you take the bus or streetcar to our central station, welcome to Omaha. If you get off the bus from Chicago, you're in the center of downtown, welcome to Omaha. That's a beacon. That's a true sign of hope. That actually brings people together. An office building that's open 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, does not bring everyone together. A central station in a city, look at all the big cities. We always talk about wanting to be like other places, but every other big city has what? A central station. All of our stations have been privatized into a museum and a news station. The library is an opportunity for us to take city services out of this hideous building and put it into something beautiful that people can actually access, that is public facing, that is amenable, that we can all benefit from. And we can take the $54 million we were gonna spend on parking, cut that in half, and you have a real renovation budget. We talk so much about being fiscally responsible and not raising taxes when really it's all about giving corporate public handouts to corporations. It's happening everywhere. I'm not making this up. So I say to you, come on, guys, really? Are you really doing this? We've been talking about this for months, and I've talked to many of you outside of this space, and you know it's wrong. So why are we doing it? Are they threatening your life? Are you afraid of not being reelected? Because it's not about elections, it's about the world. It's about us as a community. And Kimra was right. If you continue with this, the people are already rising. So there's that. But if you continue to ignore us and put towers over us, we will burn your towers down. We will tear them to the ground because it's not what we asked for. This generation is not going to stand for oppression consistently. You did it for generations, we're done. So let it be known, I can wear a suit too and talk just as directly as anybody else. I gave some sense to you. I know who I am. We know who we are. Do you?
I object to your challenge, sir.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Thanks.
Any other opponents here today on number 48?
Excuse me, I must speak before I get walked out.
No.
Shame on all of you.
Hey, Larry, you're done.
Shame on all of you.
You're done, Larry.
You have never let me get anywhere near like that.
All right. There are no more opponents. I have a number of questions. I know council members have their lights on. Before I do, though,
Marxist idea there.
I'm going to have Mr. Lanaha and Mr. Anderson come back to the podium for one moment in case they would like to address the 3 questions I have that came up during opponents' testimony, or anything else they might want to observe before we go to council members. And those 3 questions I have were if you want to address the amendment that was mentioned in a little more depth. Secondly, the public spot at 14th and Dodge, should that go through and should the city be responsible for that? How would that proceed? And then thirdly, there was a question about the design contract and how that was addressed at this point for the tower.
Sure, Mr. President. Jason Lanahaw, 17070 Wright Plaza. So I'll tackle one of them, and I think the other 2 are probably more appropriate for Mr. Anderson. I think there's some confusion when they said an amendment or an ask for more TIF. The point of the illustration was the ask is the same and the spend is much more. There is no amendment, there is no ask. So I think it was just a confusion.
There's no increase in the TIF, requested TIF amount, just an increase in the investment, which is now.
You understand, that's exactly it. So 443 to $600 million with the same ask.
In private investment.
You have it, yes.
Thank you.
And I'll let Mr. Anderson address the other 2 questions.
Sorry, I missed the second one. The third one was relating to design contracts. Kind of key differentiator is the library design contract was put out for a public competitive bid as with the city as a client. This was a private proposal, and Mr. Lana brings to us a world-class design firm that's working on this project.
Hired by the developer as a private development, right? So
Correct.
that
Yes.
was done.
Yes.
Not a city process.
And I'm sorry, Mr. President, Kevin Anderson, Mayor's Office. I missed the second question.
And the second question was, should the 14th and Dodge property become, the city become responsible for that property as a result of this agreement? How will it be maintained, and what will be the plan for that property or any public interaction around that?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, be maintained, again, like city-owned property by our fine Parks, Recreation, and Public Property Department. And then, yeah, ultimately, as city property, there'll be a public process by which, that ultimate development decision is proposed. We would request, or we anticipate, say, a publicly bid process through a request for proposals, of which scope is determined utilizing, stakeholder public input, input from the council of, what collectively we'd like to see as priorities out of that development process.
And then should there be some public use in the meantime, the public would be engaged as to how that would be conceived.
Correct. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Yes.
I'm going to close public hearing. Ms. Johnson, you're recognized.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank everyone who came in opposition to this ordinance. It shows that you really care and you're very passionate about the library and about Omaha. And more importantly, that you came today to express your right as a public citizen. However, I would like to remind everyone that the vote regarding the move of the library was made several months ago. And it saddens all of Omaha that the decision to move the library took place several months ago, but it did happen 2 months ago. And now today, what's before us is the where do we go from here? I would like to thank Mr. Lanahaw for reaching out, really sitting down, talking about what the next steps are, your vision, Mutual of Omaha's vision. There were some key points that you mentioned earlier regarding this being a game changer, to look forward to the possibility of this spearheading additional growth down here in the downtown area, and along with that, becoming more vigorous and more vibrant downtown area. Again, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your schedule, explaining all the detailing, and it's been quite a lot of information, and also Mr. Anderson, your ability to provide as much information about where we're going in the future in terms of downtown Omaha. That information was shared. I do understand that citizens in Omaha feel uncomfortable about how this transaction originally started off. But over the months, we have grown a little bit. That communication has been worked on in terms of being provided to City Council. It's not quite where we want it to be. There's some additional weigh-ins regarding the streetcar, but not so much as what we're talking about today as far as Mutual of Omaha. So I just want to, again, put things into perspective in terms of where we're at today. And again, thank everyone for coming and expressing your concern, and your voice and your concern really does matter. And I mean that. It really does matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Jason and Kevin, if you wouldn't mind, so you don't have to keep getting up and down. I've got a couple of questions that maybe you can pick and choose who to address them. And thank you, Jason, for bringing up the first point I was going to bring up. I kind of wrote down your 7 points, and actually I kind of joked to Mr. Anderson earlier today that maybe what we should have done is had a big board that connected all 7 points with the streetcar, so we could kind of follow it as we go along here, because this is a very complicated and I guess challenging process that we're going through. But you know what? That's why we're doing it. It's we're making sure we're putting these things in place, and I think the way this was laid out in your presentation today helps make that more clear, but it also shows the importance of each one of those components as we move through here to get to the, I won't even say the final place that we're going to, because this isn't the final place. This is a catalyst to spur further development. And I think Mr. Lanhaw's point of, and I know he's said it before, and I've heard it from the mayor's office as well too, and I wholeheartedly agree with it, is that not only is this a tremendous opportunity for downtown, but the development opportunity and redevelopment opportunity that this opens up in our midtown, which is anchored by Blackstone and UNMC to the west, that's already got momentum. I think this, and then we could continue on out Dodge Street and look up and down north and south, and the opportunities now with some money from the state that was just recently announced for development opportunities in North and South Omaha. I'm getting a little off topic, but let me bring it back to where we are here. So I'm going to walk through the 7 items, if you will, Mr. Lanahaw. So even though the project, I want to be clear, even though the project costs have escalated from about $443 million to approximately $600 million, the TIF amount is still the same amount, of that $68 million or so, correct?
Correct.
Okay, which, and I'll just relate this to other TIF projects that we've gone through as well too, is approximately about 11%, I think, of the total project cost, which is totally in line with. And again, I'll go off on a little tangent here. Again, this TIF is not a handout of money to the developer. So if you'd like to take a moment to address that, I'll let you do that here.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember Harding. Jason Lanahaw, 17070 Wright Plaza. So that was a theme I heard, was that this is a corporate handout, and I do understand, if you don't fully understand the facts, that it might look that way. But here are the facts of TIF. There are a couple pieces. One, it's never about the applicant. It's about the project, okay? Will the project occur but for TIF, okay? And in this case, it's very clear, no, it will not occur but for TIF. There's a significant investment to move downtown. There are many cheaper options all over the city or outside of our city for any real estate project. So that's number one. It's never about the applicant. It's always about the project. And number two, Mr. Harding, I'm blanking. What was the second part?
Well, it's just that the project costs had increased. It's just that, TIF is not a corporate handout.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. Yeah. So there's a perception that this money exists somewhere, and it's being given. This money doesn't exist. This money will never exist. It only exists with the project and the tax flows produced by this project. Mm-hmm. The nice part about it is it's for a finite period of time that helps make the project occur. Once that's done, this starts streaming into all the taxing authorities. But once again, this money doesn't exist. This only exists but for the project.
So would the payoff or the timeline to retire the TIF loan be this? It would still be the same, or would it be accelerated because the project cost is higher?
So the payoff of the TIF loan is going to depend on how the building's assessed.
Okay.
So the project cost of being more would not impact how the TIF's being paid. It's all dependent on how it's assessed.
Okay. Okay, second point, when we talked, or you mentioned the tower garage, I want to make sure that we're clear on how that is, how that portion of this equation is being contemplated. So the garage will be built by a development company, and then afterwards it'll be condominiumized, and then the city will then take it from there, as well as maintain and the operation of going forward, correct?
Correct.
And that Mutual will commit to 100% of the leasing of the stalls from, I'll say business hours, Monday through Friday, essentially.
That's correct.
At market rate.
Correct.
And that, and then afterwards, outside of those hours, then it's open to the public as well, too.
That's correct.
To, in part, take advantage of a $400 million park that the city leveraged $50 million against charitable and philanthropic $350 million to, which is, I'll take that return all day long.
Councilmember Harding, I think it's important to note that parking to support the programming of the park needs to occur.
Mm-hmm.
Here, we get it within a building, and we get a tenant paying for 100% of the stalls. It's a good deal for the city.
I would agree. And I think Mr. Anderson may have even mentioned some of the other projects that are occurring in the neighborhood that would certainly benefit from that as well too, like Steelhouse and some of the other activities in the area. So then the third point was the purchase of the 3 parking garages at Mutual of Omaha. And I don't know if maybe Kevin wants to maybe address these, please.
Kevin Anderson, Mayor's Office.
So could you just walk us through it maybe in a little more detail that you previously mentioned on the reason for and how those will be acquired, the 3 parking structures at Midtown?
Yeah, and it's worth noting at the forefront that, again, purchasing existing stalls is, especially in this day and age, far cheaper than building new. And what those stalls under city ownership and operation for public use is going to allow us to do is work with Mutual Omaha upon their vacation and disposition of their real estate holdings in the Midtown area, as well as their current tower. It's going to help us facilitate the redevelopment and reuse of existing facilities in that, because essentially we're able to kind of remove the parking equation from a development pro forma, because the stalls are there and they're readily available for residential use, commercial use, entertainment use, whatever it might be, whatever that site ultimately is programmed at, the parking will be in place, and we're getting it, on a much cheaper basis than we would to have to build it as a standalone development project.
I think 15,000 per stall.
Yeah, the redevelopment agreement anticipates approximately 15,000, which gives us some space as we are completing, say, conditional analysis of the current condition of those garages. But that was a firm baseline by which we can operate from.
And the timing for the transfer of the parking garage to city ownership would be what?
Yeah, to be done no later than Mutual's anticipated vacation of the property to their downtown tower in 2026.
Okay.
That being said, could be an opportunity to do so earlier. There is some existing parking needs for that area given the success of Med Center, Blackstone District as an example, redevelopment opportunities, say with Kiewit Tower and all of that. So there is a demand, and there could be a process by which purchase of at least some of those current stalls could be done on a much sooner basis. But we would anticipate, like the purchase of the tower garage, that those be backed by lease purchase bonds that are backed by the parking enterprise fund. So there was a comment made by which, the funds we use for parking could be utilized in other forms for other public benefit. And unfortunately, that's not the case because parking enterprise fund, its limitations to support that debt service is by code, only isolated towards parking and mobility uses. So that's one thing I wanted to clarify. But we're also able to, again, as we look at this parking system as a whole, even to support this project, look at it in terms of all of these spaces because it feeds directly into that enterprise fund and supports debt service for all parking needs throughout the urban core. Again, we're able to utilize proceeds from this transaction and other related transaction for parking structures that have been passed by this council. Those proceeds go into the advanced acquisition fund, of which we are able to utilize for the purchase of the proposed Midtown garages as well. So it's not solely backed by debt service in the parking enterprise fund. And again, for the public's benefit, I just want to make clear, when the city sells real estate assets like this, again, by charter, that does not become a windfall for the general fund, for example. So it can't go then be distributed to the departments. That is contained within the advanced acquisition fund, which is only for and solely for the purchase and selling of city-owned property.
And I think you also mentioned maybe it was Park 7's sales.
Correct, yeah. Alluding to the recent sale of Park 7, we're able to use those proceeds, again, through the advanced acquisition fund for the purchase of this, keeping it parking related to support this project.
Okay. The fourth item was the, if you will, the land swap transaction. So I think Mr. Lanahaw mentioned that they think they have that the current site that would be swapped for.
Correct.
Would appraise for somewhere around $6 million, I think is the number I think I heard, which would be about $95 a foot, which I would say for downtown land price in Omaha, Nebraska I would probably agree with that. So I also want to mention the point where I think it's important for a city to be thinking in terms of having that kind of an asset for future development. And I'll point out, I think is a very good example of that is that the current headquarters for Union Pacific sits on at least half of a block that was in a a nonprofit development corporation, and had it not been for, you know, that part of the land for that block to be thrown into the deal, we might not have Union Pacific's headquarters in downtown Omaha. So the idea of having the land swap, and maybe we can talk a little bit about why the land swap actually occurred, that kind of relates to the streetcar later on, but having the city have a developable, or, you know, shovel-ready, if you will, developable site in downtown Omaha with all the other things we're talking about happening, I think is something that will benefit the city of Omaha as well, too. So I don't know if you want to make any comments.
Yeah, several great points. For that reason, again, because, you know, the sale of property is contained within the Advanced Acquisition Fund. To me, there's far more public benefit of actually holding and controlling the land for a future development and the economic impact therein than just, you know, selling the land for a cash purchase, which is then isolated into the Advanced Acquisition Fund. So back to the kind of conversation that really drove the land swap in general is, you know, this project, the mutual project, both on both ends of the spectrum, the new downtown location and the midtown location, is largely possible and essentially reaches its full potential by direct service of the proposed streetcar. And so as we were contemplating, you know, towards the 14th and Dodge site, the old UP site, where we had a shovel-ready piece of property, rather than a you know, tremendous investment and expense that would be to alter the proposed route of the streetcar to directly serve that site, when, you know, the interest of a downtown site was made by Mutual, essentially the offer was, you know, rather than move the streetcar to a proposed and potential site, you know, could we bring the site to the proposed streetcar line?
So then the next item would be the park frontage block, which again will be in the interim used as a laydown area, then landscape, but will be eventually acquired by Mutual of Omaha based upon a market value.
Yeah, and that was done through a process by which, again, going into this, knowing that the development of these two sites had to be very carefully coordinated due to things like traffic, parking, aesthetics from the park, as a few examples. You know, we went through a number of conversations and iterations of the appropriate mechanism by which we can kind of guarantee all interests and maximize the potential of those two sites. And eventually got to the point where Mutual accepted to purchase for fair market value the entirety of the site to be utilized as a laydown, but largely as potential expansion site for Mutual of Omaha. It's important to note that even as impressive as the tower is, it is a reduction in their overall square footage dedicated towards office from their current midtown facilities. But, you know, with the city's ability to place covenants and restrictions for the ultimate development on that allows us to kind of preserve what we think is the highest and best use of that. So where, you know, the initial thought is, you know, holding in the future for potential future expansion, that doesn't necessarily have to take up the full block either. And there are a number of scenarios by which, you know, other elements or other complementary uses come out of the ground on a much sooner timeline, as an example. So ultimately, it just got to the point where we felt most comfortable with this as a mechanism, the full, you know, sale and purchase of the property with those covenants and restrictions placed on it to kind of protect the interests of not only the city, but also respect the utilization of the property and its kind of appropriateness at the bookend of Jean Leahy Mall.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all I had for you. I just had a couple maybe closing statements and kind of in shotgun approach. You know, I want to make sure that people also remember the library is not going away. We will, I think this is another example of what I was talking about maybe a little earlier about being a catalyst is that because of this in the set of dominoes that are set up, we're going to have a new downtown branch. It also gives us the opportunity to have a new central library that will expand the services and better serve our community as a whole. And I look at that as obviously a positive as well too. I mentioned the downtown park and some of those things, but and you know, as I think started out by Mr. Lanhaw said something about, you know, the healthy city, and you know, I 20 some odd years ago when I worked for the city, we concentrated a lot of our efforts on the redevelopment of downtown, because at the time in the early mid 90s our downtown was really in sad shape, and I think through the efforts of the philanthropic and the business community and the civic leadership, we got the building blocks in place to be where we are today, I think, in large part. And so I look at this as an opportunity not only to make our downtown a healthy area, or a metropolitan area a healthy area, but it's really the heart and soul of energizing a community. And so, look, I know this is complicated, and that's one of the reasons I apologize for the time it took to get through that, but I wanted to do this to show the thought process and the amount of time and the amount of thought and the amount of effort that has gone into each one of these components to get us where we are today and where I think will get us tomorrow. I think that's important. So, look, this is a tremendous opportunity. As I said earlier, it is complex, it is challenging, but that's why we're here, is to take advantage of those opportunities when we have them. And I'm excited for the prospects that this will present, not only for Omaha, but really for the whole metropolitan area. I will note that I will not be here next week. Had a previous commitment that's been planned over a couple of years that I couldn't change, but so I won't be able to vote on this next week if it is, since it's scheduled for a vote on the third reading. But if I were, I think it's pretty obvious I'd be first in line to vote for this. I think it's a tremendous opportunity for the city.
Thank you, Mr. Begley. You're recognized.
Thanks, Mr. President. When we've gone through this process, the library at 1401 Jones, I voted against that site. That ship has sailed. The mutual site is on my friend and colleague, Councilmember Johnson's side of the district, where it got reboundaried there. So I know certainly I have had conversations with Mr. Lanhaw, with city subject matter experts, and I commend Council President Festerson for pushing daily with the mayor's office to get information coming, and that's happened. Maybe it's not as fast as we wanted, but it's happened. And I think that Councilmember Johnson hit the nail on the head, that we've talked to people, we've learned the process, we're still learning it. I'm kind of bouncing around, Councilmember Harding mentioned LB 1024 that was signed by the governor a couple weeks ago through the tremendous leadership of Senators McKinney and Wayne. That's an investment of $330-something million in North and South Omaha. I believe Mutual is somewhere around $443 million. And Mr. Lanhaw confirmed that the TIF ask isn't any higher now than it was originally asked, which was $68 million. The investment is now $600 million. So that's quite a substantial investment in the city of Omaha that's happening here with this project, and we're still putting it all together. We're asking questions, we're talking to people every day. So again, this project going forward, it's a huge thing for the city of Omaha, and I it's great to have the conversation with people and continue the dialogue. That the outreach has been there, and the education's been there, and talking to colleagues daily as I certainly do, I'll continue to do that throughout, so thanks.
Thank you. And I think I'm the last one to speak, at least for today. I just wanted to have a few follow-ups too. This is a tremendously complex project. That can have a huge impact on our urban core, so it is important to take our time, hear from the public, walk through all these details. It is a very complex document we have in front of us here. 14 exhibits, 5 separate agreements that might implement it later if it's approved, a lot of real estate implications. So it's important that we're taking the time to do this today. And I have a few follow-ups I want to ask today. They are similar to some of Councilmember Hardy's questions, just a couple of more details on some of those items. And then maybe just a couple comments before we close, at least for today. And I think these are probably the same two representatives that would answer these questions, Mr. Lanahan and Mr. Anderson. As it applies to the Mutual of Omaha garage that's conceived to be built with the tower and purchased by the city, architecturally it's a little bit difficult to tell where that's placed. Is that to the east or the west of the building in those renderings? The actual garage itself?
Yeah, Mr. President, Jason Lanahaw, 170 Wright Plaza. There we go, perfect. The garage.
First several floors?
The garage wraps right through here.
It's actually the base of the tower itself.
It wraps in the base of the tower, but the important note is that it's the garage is skinned. It looks like the tower. There's a lot of extra money that the city is not paying for to ensure that it doesn't feel like a garage. And then on top of the garage, and this might help as well. Here's your garage within here.
Okay. Yeah, that's a helpful document to understanding that question.
Yeah, and then what occurs on top of the garage is about 43,000 square feet of landscaped area and amenity space for the employees.
Okay. And the city's interest in purchasing that garage once it's built is that it would provide public parking for the new park, a $300 million park development we have downtown. And how we would do that is through lease purchase bonds, I think you said, right, Kevin?
That's correct. Kevin Anderson, Mayor's Office. Yes, through lease purchase bonds supported by the Parking Enterprise Fund.
And so leasing those stalls back to Mutual of Omaha employees helps fund the debt on the garage itself.
That's correct, and that differentiates this a little bit from some other even recent public parking structures as proposed, because every single one of these will have a kind of a guaranteed rate built into the monthly. Again, it certainly helps in that financing aspect, but then the opportunity to publicly sell those nights and weekends, as well as any potential underutilization. As was mentioned, if not all employees are utilizing this, if the threshold isn't met, the city will have the opportunity to then go and kind of, for lack of a better term, backfill any parking vacancies. And again, all create a value add, if you will, to help support that indebtedness.
And will the leasing of the stalls to mutual employees fully cover the debt on those lease purchase bonds? Or are you also using other portions of the parking revenue?
Yeah, so we'll use the system as a whole. Again, if you look at this transaction even as a whole, getting the Midtown structures at that reduced rate is going to help kind of offset any, I don't want to say any loss, but any shortfall of that debt service coverage associated with the mutual tower garage, but also that oversell of nights, weekends, and any potential underutilization during the workday as well. So all of that collectively is what will kind of justify and support the debt service associated with those.
Accurate to say mostly covered by the leases to Mutual of Omaha employees. Is that a good assumption, or is that a Mr. Curtis question? Is that?
Yes.
Okay. And the other interest the city has in potentially doing this is that the parking on evenings and weekends for the public, and that interest being not only parking for the public, but presumably that helps cover the streetcar as conceived, at least its yearly operations going forward as part of how that would work, right?
Correct, yeah, because the streetcar model as proposed, and again is currently being vetted and underwritten, could potentially kind of turn out more than the actual capital construction costs of the streetcar itself. So to help facilitate that kind of annual obligation for maintenance and operation would be the potential for this funding mechanism as a TIF district to kind of take off some of the indebtedness associated with these parking structures as well, freeing up that operational revenue to meet the obligations of maintenance and operation of the streetcar.
And not just those parking stalls, but all parking stalls in the downtown area, or at least immediately adjacent to where the streetcars plan to go, would have an increased charge for parking to fund those annual operations, right? Not just this facility.
I wouldn't say as a direct result of the streetcar. I would say that market rates for parking, both on street and off street, and the structures haven't been touched for some time and are likely past due for some escalation to keep up with market demands. But also, again, to help facilitate and encourage the use of multimodal transportation, transit, like the proposed streetcar, like Orbit, and all of those. And I do want to reiterate that the need for parking doesn't go away with streetcar or Orbit or anything like that, but what it does get us to is more appropriate parking ratios. And as substantial as this proposed tower garage is at approximately 2,200 stalls, again, that is to serve 4,000 employees and a good level of square footage. So it gets us to a much better spot at about a 2.5 per 1,000 square feet of office space to parking ratio, which is really where you kind of need to be to make the streetcar make sense. So this is kind of our gold standard of appropriate parking ratio to support a project.
And then talk about the current garages at the Mutual campus on Midtown. This obviously conceives of the city purchasing those. I think you estimated 2026, but this redevelopment agreement does not actually execute that.
That's correct. Yeah, it acknowledges it as a component of the project, if you will, but it is to be determined by a future lease and purchase agreement. Correct.
And whatever that cost might be, I think Mr. Lanaha said it might be a third of a new parking garage, and that source of funds from the city's perspective is yet to be determined and would come back to the city council at some future date.
That is correct.
If it proceeds. The Mutual of Omaha purchase of property of the property directly to the east. I think we did cover that, but I think it is worth just repeating that is a purchase by Mutual of Omaha. That is not being given to Mutual of Omaha. It'll be a market rate situation. I think that appraisal is still being finalized, but that was our discussion this morning when we talked about the financial components of this agreement, that I think you're comfortable giving me a range of what that would be, which is, I won't put words in your mouth.
Yeah,
what is the range of that property on the market
What we
basis?
do know is we do have a completed appraisal for the Dale Clark Library site, and that was appraised as a structure-free development site. That came in at just over $7.8 million. The two sites are very similar in size. I would anticipate that translating over very comparably, and that's where we get into the kind of range of approximate. Again, I don't want to do an appraiser's job here on the record, but the range of the approximate appraisal rate of the old UP property as well, and maybe a different or a slightly lesser value per square foot, and it is a slightly smaller site as well.
Mm-hmm. So a purchase agreement to buy that property would also come to the city council at a later date. Is that correct?
I may look to law if that's not already contemplated in this agreement.
Mr. Indabash?
Taylor, since she's the one who worked on the agreement.
Good to see you there, Jennifer.
Good evening, Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. The purchase of what I refer to in the agreement as the park frontage block is part of this agreement. There is a purchase agreement for that block as part of what you will be approving next week, and as part of this agreement. It does not have a specific price in it. What it does set is that Mutual Omaha is obligated to pay the amount that is produced on an appraisal. And so when that appraisal is done, that will be the purchase price. There will be no negotiating from there.
Okay. And Mr. Anderson, do you think we'll have that appraisal by next week?
That may be a bit expeditious, but yeah, very soon, I would think.
Okay. I'd like to have it by next week, even though we think it's 7.8 million. It would be nice to know exactly what that number is.
I'd be happy to follow up with our appraiser and verify. It shouldn't be, he didn't think it was going to take him a terribly long time to do it, so I'll follow up with the appraiser tomorrow and I'll let the council know.
Okay, thank you. And then you started to go here to Mr. Anderson. So that has been estimated, the Union Pacific property, is what I call it, has been estimated to be about $6 million, and that's a property the city would then assume and have for future development purposes.
Correct.
And the current library site, which is now part of the new development, which is part of what we're calling the exchange there, what has that property been appraised at?
Just over 7.8 million.
Okay. So all pretty similar values here we're talking. All right. And then I also had a question about the Turner Park arrangements. I was pleased to hear you say that with the city taking that maintenance responsibility back on, that wouldn't be of a new burden to the Parks Department or wouldn't otherwise be covered by or be a detriment to how we're maintaining other parks with that responsibility. I believe you said it would be paid for by TIF proceeds, is that correct?
Not necessarily TIF, but I do foresee a future mechanism by which, again, the development surrounding that area makes the financial contribution obligation for the overall operation and maintenance of that site, let alone operational revenue from the site itself.
Okay.
I foresee that there's a few different mechanisms by which that occur. A business improvement district as an example, an agreement with a owners association as another. But yeah, we do anticipate there are a number of paths forward in terms of a mechanism by which that revenue can be generated to support the operation and maintenance of Turner Park.
Do you know what that number is today?
Today, it's approximately 700,000. I do want to add that as a city likely contract is what we would anticipate in working with Mr. Kalsovich and the Parks Department. That would be a publicly bid process and competitively bid process. So I could see that fluctuating up or down based off of a bid process.
To contract that maintenance?
Correct.
Okay. And you're thinking that's not until 2026 most likely?
Correct, yeah. It's contemplated upon vacation by mutual of the Midtown campus.
Well, I think it's important to walk through all these details and make sure we're also doing our fiduciary responsibility on something that's complicated. And large-scale $600 million economic development projects with 4,000 employees are complicated. And so it's important for us all to do our due diligence as to how this is going to work and what our commitments are as a city financially in this respect. And everything we just covered there has no impact on the city's general fund, at least no impact on anything that's not otherwise funded with proceeds from the project itself, or in the case of the parking garage, the park install fees. My last point today, then I see there's a couple more lights on. It does say in this redevelopment agreement that the city must continue its good faith efforts towards the streetcar, but this document does not approve a streetcar. Just want to reiterate that. And I think we still have a lot more work to do on the streetcar as a body, just like we're doing today. We spent almost an entire hour this morning, the Finance Committee did, on streetcar financing. We've been asking for a lot of information on that, to Mr. Bailey's point, and still need a lot more information on that. But I think we're in a much better spot than we were even just a couple months ago when this was announced. And I see that as the job of the City Council, to offer these opportunities to the public, to have this kind of exchange, to focus on the details that, frankly, I think haven't been too focused on yet by almost anybody, and certainly not the general public, as these things are put forward to the City Council. And there's a lot more still coming, not just this redevelopment agreement, but I don't want to say a dozen, but probably about a dozen public hearings still to go on related items to this project and to the streetcar and to the bonds and to the Streetcar Authority. So a lot more work to be done in that respect, and I know the council is up to that task. Mr. Rowe, you're recognized.
Thanks. I just had one quick question on the appraisal. If the appraisal did come in at 7.8 million, I know none of us are running for county assessor, but is it the expectation that that base valuation would be somewhere near that for the base value of the property going forward?
Jennifer Taylor, City Law Department. So are you asking about the value of the Dale Clark's, the library site, or of the park frontage block? So that's the appraised value. Again, I can't speak for the county assessor, but obviously that's information the county assessor would take into account when they set that base valuation.
Mr. Rowe, Jason Lanahaw, or Councilman Rowe, Jason Lanahaw, 17070 Wright Plaza. I think it's important to note as well that whatever that base valuation gets assigned to is more than what's occurring now. Right now, it's paying $0 in tax. Even with the TIF on day one, it will be paying something much greater than that. And I think that's important to note.
Okay. Mr. Harding, you're recognized.
Thanks. I noticed I did skip over. I'm glad you brought up some of the questions on Turner Park because I went from park frontage block to the streetcar and forgot point number 6, which was Turner Park. And remember, I know that we're talking about taking over the full responsibility for the maintenance of it. We need to remember at this point, half of that park is really the city's today, and Mutual is the one who's taking care of it today. So when we talk about taking over the whole maintenance and operation of the park, we're really, in essence, talking about the fact that we're really only taking half of what's really ours back on top of the other half that Mutual currently has.
Thank you. No further lights? Non-action items, please.
Non-action items. Items 49 through 55 do not require a public hearing or city council consideration at this meeting, but will be placed on a future agenda for public hearing and or vote. The reason for non-action is noted after the item on the agenda, as well as the date the item is expected to appear on an agenda for consideration.
Second. Roll call.
Harding. Johnson. Melton is absent. Palermo.
Yes.
Rowe. Bagley. Mr. President.
Yes.
Motion passed 6-0. Meeting is adjourned at 5:10.